The following podcast is proudly brought to you by Vite Ramen. Use the link in the description and use offer code BROKENSILICON to get 10% off tasty, healthy, and easy-to-make ramen. And also use the offer code BROKENSILICON to get 25% off Windows keys and die shrink to get 3% off everything else on the website at cdkeyoffer.com. Now, on with the show. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom. Today, as I am on, I think, yes, every news episode we've done, I am joined by my co-host,
Dan.
How you doing, Dan?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing, Tom?
I mean, I'm fine. You know, it's been a very long week. We put out a extra girthy episode of Die Shrink for the patrons, so don't forget that's out there. If you do support us, or if you're considering supporting us, all about like how gamer-only dies could, be better executed on in the future. Kind of both discussing the similar but really opposite ideas of how AMD could have handled the 6500 XT better, how they could have, if they could see the future, designed it better. They obviously couldn't change it after things were set in motion. And then also like what a good execution would just be in the future. Like, what do you focus on? What do gamers actually need? How much cheaper does it need to be than a normal GPU that can do everything? I mean, that was almost another broken silicon out there on really specific subjects for the patrons.
And also accidentally about budget gaming in general.
Right.
PC gaming in general.
Which, it's funny. And I'll hint more about it and drop some whispers about other upcoming products that are not these low-end GPUs most people frankly don't care about. Because I do actually have quite a bit of Alchemist, some Lovelace RDNA 3 and other leaks, Meteor Lake stuff that I've been sitting on. Some of it that I'm sitting on because it's like, oh, you can't just leak something once you get the first set of info because someone could get in trouble. Yeah. But also just because again, I said the 6500 XT release was the pricing singularity. The product itself isn't good, and it's probably not something most PC gamers are interested in, but the factors that created its existence are very important to be fully understood, I think, by this community because it's changing. But I guess what I'm saying is a long week, somewhat of a stressful week because I knew those would be polarizing opinions, although it actually did gain us quite a bit of subscribers compared to some other weeks. So I know that we made the right decision in putting our foot down and, trying to really not back down, but put a magnifying glass on the maybe misunderstood and like overlooked factors going on right now in PC gaming. Maybe polarizing, but it was to our benefit and I think to the benefit of the community. But now I'm ready to start getting back to more typical content because frankly, we shouldn't usually care that much about the low-end GPUs. It's just so crazy that what's made it so we could not stop talking about them for a few weeks.
Well, I mean, yeah, when you when twin product launches that are received differently for, a bunch of different weird factors, it's kind of impossible not to talk about it, especially when there's no real other product releases in like this couple week window, at least.
I mean, what else are we going to talk about, right? But yeah, so I guess I'm excited. We, of course, will touch on them a little bit because there are a couple things here in the stories to touch on again, but I'm happy to start moving on to more typical stuff. First, let me do an opening reader mail here. Blokes writes in, he says, I would just like to report that on my Z690 system, despite a consistent brief flash to black upon resuming a video for some reason, AMD GPU driver version 21.12.1 has yet to crash the system with this 5700 XT running and halting hardware accelerated video decoding. So after 2.5 years, RDNA 1 GPUs are finally, in quotes, stable and in quotes, working. I read this because I just think it's worth touching back on things that we discussed very heavily a year ago, to kind of put the back cover on a book on that one. I remember so many people, including me, hearing that there were hardware bugs in RDNA 1, at least in the Navi 10 die, that might make it never stable. It seems like right now people are reporting it is completely stable. So if there were hardware bugs, I don't know, but they were able to work their way around them in the software if there were. So I guess that's good. Good to know that RDNA 1 does indeed work now.
Nothing else to add. I mean, woo.
Yeah.
Stable drivers.
All right, let us move on to corrections and omissions. QH Freddy writes in the loose ends of last, you mentioned a 5 gigabyte 80-bit GPU being possible since 5 gigabyte 160-bit GPUs were possible. Well, that is not wrong on the surface necessarily. A 5 gigabyte 80-bit GPU would be substantially more complex in terms of component count and PCB cost than a 6 gigabyte 96-bit or maybe even 4/8 gigabyte 128-bit GPU. Firstly, at least on the AMD side, the current GDDR memory interfaces are designed as 32-bit blocks. So an 80-bit controller would require the halving of one of those blocks, which I have seen before, by the way, on some GPUs, so everyone knows. Not this generation, of course, though. Secondly, you would be forced to use 5 memory chips for physically a 5 gigabyte card, since that is the only way to evenly divide up the 5 gigabytes. With the 160-bit memory interface, that is fine, because the widest you normally use GDR modules is at the 32-bit module. But going down to 16 would mean that you are creating more complexity and getting worse performance. A 6 gigabyte 96-bit card only needs 3 memory modules, reducing the amount of wiring on the PCB. The 16 lanes need to be accompanied by many control traces too. That said, it could be interesting to have a 96-bit or even 128-bit card with physically 6 or 8 gigabyte VRAMs respectively, but with memories disabled, maybe fused off to an amount that specifically stops you from mining Ethereum. On this is coming up on something I talked about on the loose ends and a little bit in the last die shrink. So it's funny, QH Freddy, if you haven't listened to the newest die shrink yet, we already kind of addressed this, right? Because I did, but it's worth reading in the main piece of content, I think, publicly, because it is at least half wrong, if not entirely wrong, that I suggested that. 160 is divisible by 32. So,
Yeah. When I see 80, but I was immediately thinking, could that potentially work? And I guess kind of, but it might be more expensive to do that in the long run. Well, it would be more expensive probably than having 6 gigabytes.
Which is something we discussed in that die shrink. And I did speak to an AMD engineer about it because I was like, actually, I think he may have reached out to me saying, by the way, something to correct. After a back and forth there, the conclusion actually was, you know what? It's not that you can't do it. I'm just not sure you can, and it would be weird. Like, it'd be a weird decision because you could put a 32, and a 16-bit controller, and then put 2 plus 2 plus 1. 2 gigabyte modules, and then 1 gigabyte. But that might be just as expensive on the die as just having 96-bit. At that point, you might as well just disable part of the bus to lower the performance and memory capacity if you want to or something.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because that is what Intel's doing with Arc, so you almost might as well do that anyways.
Although I would say, unless it was the part of the module where it's like physically disabled, miners would figure out a workaround to get that extra gigabyte enabled if it were on the chip. Okay.
They would definitely, physically. Yeah, I mean, so I don't know. I mean, and when I say Arc, I mean A380, should have 6 gigabytes on desktop. They just disable one of the 32-bit controllers on laptop because it doesn't need it and it saves space. Assuming AMD could do that too. I don't know though, but yeah, that's just some of the talk we had though. I guess is that possible? The answer is probably, but unlikely they would decide to do that. And just an interesting idea for just giving exactly the amount of memory you need for gaming in 1080p, which again, I think people will go 5 gigabytes. That won't help any more than 4. Yeah, it would, because you're still shuffling data in and out. And I bring this up, like when I game on my 3070, I try to keep VRAM usage just below 7 gigabytes, so it's never getting any performance stuttering moving the data in and out, which it definitely does in Battlefield on some settings. If I let it start at like 7.5 gigabytes of usage, eventually it builds up to 8 and then keeps bouncing up and down. You don't want that. So 5 gigabytes could allow you to use 4 gigabytes without any of the stuttering issues associated.
Yeah.
Jensen Wang writes in, I believe you have discussed another company saying Navi21, what a terrible codename. He's pretending he's Jensen Wang. But anyways, he moves on. He says, I believe you said that Navi21 is the largest GPU AMD made in terms of area. Fiji was larger, pathetically small at only 600 millimeters squared compared to what NVIDIA does, but larger than 520, or I think it's 528 millimeters squared Navi21 has, which is a notable correction. I was wondering if I was getting that wrong when I said that. What I meant is kind of like the biggest for how mature the node is. It's like, yeah, Fiji was 600 millimeters squared almost, but at the same time, Fiji was like the third generation on 28 nanometer.
Yeah.
So it's like, but that is true. That is the biggest die AMD's made for gaming before. So a worthy correction is that is wrong.
And by Nvidia's own CEO, I mean, he has to knock an AMD product when he can, Tom.
Seems to be a huge fan of broken silicon, though.
Yeah.
All right, a quick heads up here, everybody. So how me and Dan usually record the news episodes, we record on Sunday evening, and then it gets edited, and then there's final checks, making sure everything's good, making sure the thumbnail looks right on Monday. That's when it goes to patrons. Sometimes it comes out earlier if we record earlier, but that's how it generally works. Is we record Sunday, we get it to patrons Monday. That gives us a little more time to make sure all of the free feeds are ready to go by Tuesday, and then it drops Tuesday. But as we were doing the final touches on the edit of the episode, the thumbnails, literally about to click release to patrons, of course the news dropped that Sony bought Bungie, and me and Gerard felt it was worth the extra effort to pull everything down quick, record a little bit, and re-upload. So what you're about to hear after this section is the initial, very long, actual, about 30-minute discussion of what we think about Microsoft buying Activision, Blizzard, King, and all these other studios, what it means for the market, how Sony's likely to respond. That's all going to be left there unedited. And then after that, you're going to get me cold calling Dan at work, where he didn't know Sony had bought Bungie yet. And I just tell him and wait for his reaction, and it's pretty funny. So I just wanted to give you guys a heads up that if at points in the next 30 minutes we sound a little out of the loop, it's because the news hadn't come out yet as of that recording. But I still think all of it ages very well. And then after that, there's a 10-minute discussion on Sony buying Bungie, because we just felt like it had to be added. So, all right, let's get back to, again, what you're about to hear is recorded before the Bungie news, and then after that will be us reacting to Sony buying Bungie. All right, let us move on then to story number 1. Microsoft will buy Activision Blizzard, betting $70 billion on the future of games. Quoting from the New York Times, Microsoft plans to buy the powerhouse but troubled video game company Activision Blizzard for nearly $70 billion. Its biggest deal ever, and one that places a major bet that people will be spending more and more time in the digital world. The blockbuster acquisition announced on Tuesday would catapult the company into a leading spot in the $175 billion gaming industry. Games on virtually every kind of device, from bulky consoles. Bulky? Who wrote this? Bulky compared to what, dude? Casual. To smartphones, have gained even greater popularity during the pandemic. Technology companies are swarming around the industry looking for a bigger share of attention and money from the world's 3 billion gamers. So, yeah, and this was discussed heavily on the last guest episode with Hogue Law. I really recommend everyone check that out. Link will be in the description somewhere if you haven't listened to it yet. But we talked about the implications of that. Before I give any opinions or read any reader mails, I've talked about it with Hogue Law, and I think I talked about it in the recent Loose Ends by myself, but I haven't discussed it with you yet. I mean, let's just start in two places. Number one, when did you see this news, and what was your gut reaction? And number two, just what do you think by now?
I think it was our gaming friends group chat that I first saw it. I was in the lab, and I hadn't looked at my phone for probably an hour and a half, and then I just saw a message. Oh, Activision Blizzard is being acquired by Microsoft, and I was like, do they mean like a studio? Do they mean they're acquiring the wing of Activision Blizzard, like Blizzard? That's what I was like, oh no, they are paying $70 billion to acquire the biggest, is it the biggest third-party publisher? Or
I think it is, yeah.
The biggest third-party publisher, and they just bought Call of Duty, basically. And it took me a few minutes to just like actually read, like, oh no, this is actually the thing that they're doing. This is insane. This is like one of the biggest acquisitions I think I've ever heard of. And, then I thought about it a while. It's like this is way, way more of an encroachment, way bigger corporate consolidation move than buying ZeniMax, which ZeniMax kind of, in a weird way, almost makes sense with Microsoft. I feel like their products have typically been more Microsoft aligned anyways in the past. and their games are best on PC anyways.
Mm-hmm.
But no, this is a huge blow for Sony, and it's a huge blow for, I think, consumers in the long run, because now Microsoft and Sony, I guess they're just as big, or their gaming wings are just as big. Microsoft has shown that there is no fish too small for them to catch, and I don't know if this is where they stop, if they keep going, what position Sony feels itself is forced into. Like, is Sony going to try to buy Square Enix? I mean, that would be, I think, closer to the level of something like ZeniMax, but still not great for the market. And I think long term there might be a lot of issues with game quality, because every company is being bought up by Microsoft. Sony has to move to that. Sony's probably being forced to go to a subscription model at some point too. And I'm worried what games will look like not 2-3 years from now, but 5-6 years from now. I'm worried that you're going to be forced into a position where you basically have to buy Game Pass for whatever they want to charge you, $40 a month. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting you say nothing's going to change immediately. I mean, that's definitely true. That's something I've thought about more. You know, I've obviously been thinking about this for over a week now. But in the past few days, that's something I've thought about. I think I heard them talk about it on Sacred Symbols and stuff too. Just like this point of, at the end of the day, this is something where nothing's really going to change in the next 2 years. I mean, whatever contracts they have on PlayStation, or, you know, even Nintendo for some of their games or whatever, those are still in effect, you know. And Phil Spencer publicly confirmed that. At the end of the day, whatever Sony has coming out, whatever competitors with Microsoft have coming out, they're going to have them coming out, and nothing changes. The question really is, what does this, when will we see the effects of this? And I think it's really 2024. And what will be the effects, both good and bad? Because I'm starting to try to think of it in a more, and I do think the gut reaction is negativity. I think most people are going, this is maybe a bridge too far here. This is getting to the point where it's like, what are we, just yay, one company owns everything? Yay! Like, what are you even cheering for at a certain point? But at the same time, it's like, well, they own Activision now. It won't affect anything for a few years. Maybe this will make other people form new studios and make more competition to fight it. Because ultimately, that's where you get more competition and creativity. When you make a new studio, when you make a new gaming IP, when you make something to compete with something you're forced to compete with, instead of just having it on your system as well. You know, maybe this will make other people band together and make a new publisher. Maybe this will make Sony say, maybe we shouldn't just be making third-person shooters and action games. You know,
they shouldn't be.
They shouldn't be. No. You know, that's where I will say, after having some time to ruminate on it, I go, maybe this will actually force more competition than you'd think. And you always wonder, like, once you start buying up too many things, is there actually any synergy there? Or are you just going to have managed, like, how is Microsoft going to manage like 1,000 studios effectively without closing half of them? And I mean, they're still going to be making the same game, so you almost wonder, like, what did they really spend this? I don't know. I still think we're going to have to see. You know, yeah, I think it's questionable that this was anything that will benefit them more than just, again, $70 billion. They could just make at least 100 Grand Theft Autos. So, like, and no, I know there's not all of those auteurs out there to make 100 Grand Theft Autos, but it does put things in perspective. Like, imagine if they made new games, you know, that you couldn't get anywhere else, that wouldn't have been made without their money. You know, this just seems like the least efficient way to do that, actually, in terms of money spent. It's easier, but it's the least efficient.
Yeah, I wish what they would do is empower the studios they already have, if they have this much money to spend on their gaming department, because at the end of the day, like, $70 billion is such a huge amount of money. I don't know how long it will even take for them to make this money back. That $70 billion is massive. And I just don't see how, I just think this is solely a thing to be, not just to be a shot at Sony, but this is just, I think, a signal that they're going to be more and more committed to turning Xbox into the Netflix of games. And maybe that will be a good thing. But once again, I've said it before, I think the more cash that is, the more studios that need to be supported by Game Pass means either the more money they need to be going into Game Pass, or the lowering the budgets of all these games that are supported by it, or they are going to just keep hemorrhaging money, which, that's a big Silicon Valley move is hemorrhaging money for years and then raising prices. You can do that. And I think that's where everything is moving towards, even outside of gaming, and it just kind of sucks.
Mm-hmm. And you worry when that turns into a bubble, because if it works well, it works well. If it doesn't work well, my God, the amount of other things they could have done with this money,
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, I know, and I see comments that are just complete, like on comment sections about this, that are just completely disconnected from reality. Like someone saying, I spend $800 on games a year.
How?
Honestly, a $60 option for a monthly subscription sounds great. No one spends $800 on games a year. You spend $800 because you have a spending problem.
Yeah, like I don't, and I've actually bought a lot of games recently. I can't imagine spending that much. And it's like, I don't know. I just still don't think either people have been forced to put their money where their mouth is, because what we've been playing a lot of Age of Empires 4. I played Halo Infinite. There was another game too recently, and I paid $1 for 3 more months of Game Pass. Like, guys, they can't afford to make these games long term like that. Like, so
yeah, it's literally not possible. I don't think people get that.
I think what's going on is obvious. They're gonna kill Xbox Gold. They're going to make it $20 a month, and they're gonna close a third of these studios in 4 years. The ones that sink will sink. The ones that swim, and they will say, "Well, at least we gained all this IP."
Yeah, I think there's a really good chance.
And maybe that'll work out well, because, again, I think you might see competitors to Game Pass rise up. You might see new studios emerge of, like, ex-employees at various... They're out there. There's been a few closures over the past 10 years. They could come and make a new, publisher. It's happening more and more often. You might see Sony say, all right, we're just going to build 10 more teams now to, like, revive half of our franchises we've been doing nothing with, which, to be fair, they haven't been doing enough with a lot of them, I don't think. And so I don't think it's going to necessarily be a net. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, the only way this would turn out horribly is if everyone rolls over. And I just don't think everyone's going to roll over. And I don't think Microsoft's the worst owner for these studios either. There's far worse companies to own them, So I think it is going to work out. I just think, don't assume it's going to work out the way you think it is in any direction, good or bad.
Yeah, about like the cycle of studio closures, like it's a little funny. I think this is emblematic of how this all works. Like Sony Liverpool, Studio Liverpool was the first big acquisition Sony ever made. They closed the studio in 2012. The team reformed and they just rebought Studio Liverpool after closing it, basically, and now it's called Firesprite.
Yeah, I think you're going to see Sony rethink how maybe carelessly they were to close some studios. Like, to this day, the biggest mistake I think was Zipper. Just absurd that they closed that studio because of a few.
Yeah,
well, Media Molecule just, I don't know, beats off in the corner, not doing anything with Dreams. Not that I'm trying to anger fans of Dreams, all 5 of you who play it, but I'm just saying, like, there's some weird decision making at some of these competitors to Microsoft, not just Sony, and you go, maybe they're going to be forced to stop being careless as well now, because the threat is real to them.
Yeah, that's very true. The threat is real. I mean, I think now for... I guess trying to get into I'm not going to say positive, because I don't want to paint this in a positive light.
I'm done being crazy negative
about
it, though, and I was never crazy. There are people way more negative than me about. I never actually really talked about it much. I think I'm just at the, you know what, this is huge, this is unprecedented, and we're not going to see the effects nor the counter effects to this for a while. I think let's just see what happens, I guess. Actually, I'm not. The world isn't over, and it's. If you think this is bad, it's not. And if you think it is good, you're still not going to see any real benefits of this for years. So,
yeah. Or if you say something like, this is a great day to be an Xbox fan, ask yourself what what did you actually get from this happening? And it's like the same thing where, except on a orders of magnitude size greater scale. Like if you see the new Final Fantasy game being a third-party exclusive for Sony, and you're like, well, that's a big win for me as a PlayStation fan. No, it's not.
Is it?
You would have gotten the game either way.
Yeah, I know.
They just paid Square Enix a huge sum of money to deprive part of the market of that game because they want people to buy a PS5. The one good thing I did want to talk about, because I don't think there's not much to talk about, I just think it should be mentioned, is Phil Spencer tweeted they intend to keep my Call of Duty on all platforms, and I don't think people are talking about that enough.
Yeah, I think the biggest question on that one is how soon do they bring new Call of Duties to Game Pass? Because I would be a little surprised if it was day one Game Pass. Although not completely surprised. You know, there's so many games where they just, you get it on Game Pass for free, or you can buy it on PlayStation, and then they just make no money on Game Pass, and Sony sells 10 million copies of that game no matter what, which I think is what's going to happen. But I would wonder if they would just not bring it day and date, but they do this thing, which would be cool. And actually, as someone who has Game Pass, I would appreciate is if they brought all the old Call of Duty so I can go back and play some of those campaigns without having to spend money on them. That would be an interesting move, actually.
Yeah, that would be.
And that's kind of what I'm expecting. I don't expect day one this year, although I wouldn't rule it out. No one should be ruling this out. But I think at first I wonder if that's what they'll do, is just bring last year's, and then if you want to buy it, maybe it's cheaper, and it's cheaper to get it day one on Xbox, and then 1 year later, you're going to get it for free or something.
Yeah, that could definitely be what they end up doing. I mean, well, we have to see how much they're putting all of their eggs into the Game Pass basket, because I think if they're full steam ahead, Game Pass is the future, day and date is likely for probably not this year. I don't even think the acquisition is necessarily going to go through this year.
That's true. So yeah, definitely not this year then.
So 2023, we'll see if that is a day and date on Game Pass and $60 on PS5, because
70.
Activision
was one of those companies actually insisting on $70 for the new generation. So
yeah, and if you're a person that plays Call of Duty every year, maybe gets one or two more games every year, getting it through Game Pass is probably a better option for you at its current price. Now I say at its current price because I'm doubtful that it's going to remain $15 forever.
Yeah.
But, their biggest game is going to remain on PS5 for the foreseeable future, for what it's worth.
Mm-hmm.
In some form.
Falto writes in, after thinking about it for a while and listening to your recent podcast, I have concluded that I am not happy with Microsoft buying Activision. The biggest reason being now that Sony is going to push even harder for more exclusives on their platform, which will also force Xbox to do the same. Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know how many count. We'll see, though. I mean, I don't see Xbox just buying EA. I have heard that it is likely if they tried to buy EA within a year now, the FTC would probably step in at that point and block the deal. But anyways, which means more games that would otherwise be multi-plat will now be exclusives or timed exclusives on either side. Does this help us as consumers? Nope, it just hurts us. Now we're going to be forced to buy both consoles to play all the games. Unless you want to miss out on like half of the new games, as they'll be locked to Sony or Microsoft. Even PC will be affected by this, as now if you spent $2,000 on a shiny new rig, you'll still need a Sony console as well to enjoy all games. What are your guys' thoughts on this? You guys agree or disagree? And is there anything we can do as consumers to prevent this dystopia from happening? Yeah, and I think it's very likely Sony's going to try to buy. I think it'd be very pro-consumer for them to at least get Konami's IP, because Konami's just doing nothing with it, and they have a long lineage with Konami games. I think Sony's probably going to go for Square Enix for the lineage reasons, and we don't need to get in. There's a myriad of reasons they go for Square Enix first. I pointed out about a dozen times now, Sony could easily afford to buy Ubisoft. I don't think they will, but I think it's worth pointing out that them buying Ubisoft is kind of like Microsoft buying Activision. They could certainly afford to do it. People underestimate how small some of these publishers are actually in net worth. But yeah, I mean, I do think that Sony's going to try to do some of these things, and I do think there's a huge difference. It's not like. It's just not the same as like funding games for years already and then buying a studio you've been working with for a decade, just wanton buying random stuff. It seems it is different, and it does suck. And Like you already pointed out, Dan, you haven't gained anything. Just someone lost something if it's now on your console but not on another one. In terms of the question here about like what consumers do to prevent this dystopia from happening, at this point, I'd say very little. What I would just say is keep in mind what you're paying for. If you think a game's worth the money and you want to play it, and it ends up being good, we don't have a cyberpunk situation, buy it. You're funding a new game. And I think people need to start realizing that if they want good games, they need to buy them or they won't exist anymore.
Yeah, and it kind of makes me think of a bit from, I believe it was The Office. Do you remember there was this joke where you could get a coupon book that had like $250,000 worth of deals. So I forgot who, but like someone thought that means that you were basically getting $250,000 for it. Mm-hmm. You would need to spend millions of dollars to get that value out of it. And this is to just go to the whole thing. I think we need to start discussing what value is in a different way, because you can say through Game Pass, you're essentially buying 400 games for $15 a month. Are you going to play all of them? You're not. So the way you need to look at Game Pass is how many games am I spending per month, per like month of subscription? Because as it stands right now, if you're playing one game through Game Pass every 4 months or so, then you're basically breaking even on what it would just be like to buy games a la carte.
Which they're hoping most people do, or this won't be profitable. Guys, they're literally betting that most people won't get their value out of it. That is this entire business model. Like, stop pretending it's not. And at the end of the day, me and you would have bought Age of Empires 4. That would have funded more DLC. Instead, we paid $1. So, why? Because who cares? I'm paying $1 if you give me the option right now. Then I'll buy it again when it goes on sale, because I do want to keep it on Steam probably eventually. But it's just, I would have bought Halo and Age of Empires 4. Now I'm not going to. And you have to, ask yourself, you have to ask yourself, like, is this just hurting them? Or is there there's going to have to be a longer play where they assume you don't get your money's worth.
Yeah.
Otherwise, this business model does not work.
Or it doesn't work for them any better than the old a la carte system did at maximum.
Which is what you're seeing now with streaming, where it was awesome, where you only needed a few, but now it's turning into more and more and more and more of these streaming things where it's costing the same as a TV package anyways for most people. For not most people, but it's getting close. Rajem Kadori writes in, "Hey Tom, the video game market is rapidly consolidating as the market makers shift towards subscription services like Game Pass. Do you expect this to have any major effect on game piracy in the long term, similar to what has happened recently with video streaming? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this." And I would say, it's going to hurt piracy a lot. But it's already been hurt by the fact that half of the games are online now.
Yeah, piracy just seems like an increasingly difficult thing. I guess with all of this consolidation, there might be a move for people to try pirating stuff more, especially if Game Pass gets more and more expensive and half of games are only available exclusively through that, which I don't think we'll ever get to that scenario, because I think the FTC would step in before that happens. But, it's a discussion that needs to be had. Yeah,
as long as it's nearly free, people won't need to pirate. But if it became expensive, then piracy would just show up again,
Yeah.
Amiable Chief writes in, he says, "Isn't the consolidation of studios within the game industry the software equivalent of major chip designers buying fab capacity at a blistering pace? They're both rolling in cash and using the once-in-a-century opportunity to strengthen and sustain their leadership positions. I can't help but think that there will be somewhat of a whiplash effect down the road, though, which will impact the gaming industry more than it does big silicon." I agree with the last sentence there. I think that nothing changes for now, and the whiplash will be harder than what's going on in the silicon space, because at the end of the day, and I do see people say, like, I saw one reader mail that I didn't put in here, but I think I saved for a mailbag eventually, like talking about, like, isn't TSMC a monopoly of gaming? And it's like, I don't know, the biggest gaming architecture, Ampere, is made at Samsung. So it isn't, though,
Yeah, that's true. TSMC is making huge moves, and maybe some body will eventually go in and smack them down. But The fact of the matter
it's so complicated,
is,
though. I find it unlikely because, like, a national security reason they would let them be so powerful for some countries.
Yeah, because I think it's more complicated because at the end of the day, while all this capacity is being bought from TSMC, it's still multi-company deals. Like if TSMC went out and like bought AMD or something, that would probably be bad.
Yeah.
That would definitely be bad for the market. I mean, I think
it would lower innovation
right.
for sure, I think we've seen more innovation in silicon when they don't have their own fabs. So
yeah, because there's the option that if this deal with TSMC breaks down, eventually AMD could move to Samsung again or something like that. And I think you're correct, completely right with like the whiplash effect with the gaming industry. Like I've said, kind of implied, I'm a little worried about like a gaming crash, like at the level of the 80s. I don't think gaming will ever go away because it's one of the most popular hobbies in the world now. But if you have a bunch of studios that were huge, they can't make money anymore. 20 or big studios or a bunch of AA studios get shut down because these entities that keep buying them can't support all of them. You might just see fewer good games for a while.
Or they all feel the same. Again, there's the Ubisoft game effect and the Sony game effect, which some of it's not bad. It's like, if one Sony studio makes the best clouds, why don't they use that cloud tech in all their games, so on and so forth. But you do see this thing where like a lot of the gameplay starts to look and feel the same in all Ubisoft, all Sony games. What happens when a third of all games are controlled by Microsoft? Are they all going to start to have the same side missions and look the same? Why would Microsoft be free from that happening, whereas Ubisoft isn't? And Sony's, I think, actually started to publicly acknowledge, and so is Ubisoft, yeah, we need to fix our games feeling the same. Like, what happens when a third of the games are controlled by the same group?
Yeah, and I guess I haven't thought about from Ubisoft's perspective, because to me it's almost kind of seemed like this is what Ubisoft wants to do, where it's, and maybe I'm just completely off base on that, like, oh, they just want to make open world checklist games for the most part, which I'm not saying those are bad. Having one of those every year or two is good, and the fact that they produce a bunch of them in a bunch of different locales and eras is like, oh, which Assassin's Creed type game do you want? Do you want to get the Assassin's Creed? Do you want to get post-pandemic Assassin's Creed? Do you want to get do you want to get weird villain Assassin's Creed? Which one do you want?
Well, I saw an ad for, what is it, Rainbow Six Extraction, and before the title came up, I thought it was an expansion pack to The Division 2.
Yeah,
like they're wearing the same outfits,
Yeah, and I think Sony's was a bit more accidental.
Mm-hmm. Although they realize what they've done, I think, by now. But
yeah, I would love to see Guerrilla revive Killzone, but
or make something new.
Or make something new. Yeah,
I don't need young Sheldon. Make a new thing. All right,
young Killzone,
young Hellgast. All right, Dan, so my understanding is you haven't looked at the recent news, and I wanted to call you while you're at work for just like 5 minutes to get this reaction to add to Broken Silicon. Dan, Sony just bought Bungie. You can unmute yourself now and tell me what you think.
Jesus Christ. I mean, I wasn't expecting something to happen this soon.
Well, and I'm already seeing in the Moore's Law's Dead Discord people saying things like, this is prophetic. This is what they were talking about. I guess we expected them to buy a few places, but was Bungie on your radar at all?
No, but I guess this fulfills their shooter category that I think we talked about on the most recent podcast.
Right, which here's the funny thing as well. I think they also publicly announced that they don't plan to have a bunch of exclusives they pull from Microsoft. In my opinion, this is a bargaining chip, so they can this is insurance. This is them going, well, now we know they won't pull Call of Duty off because we can pull Destiny and whatever Bungie's working on from them. And I have to say it, I've heard backroom stories about like what Nintendo and Sony did when Sony was first founded out of spite on Nintendo screwing them over. To me, this also is a clear punch specifically to say now we own the people who made Halo, right? There's no way around it, right? This also just feels like there's a reason they chose Bungie.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a studio they have a strong relationship with, really, compared to the other things we talked about. I mean, other studios that are in the running, so I don't think it's the one you would expect, but it makes sense as an offensive action RA.
You know, I think, though, we might acknowledge there's been a lot of deals with Destiny on PlayStation in the past, but I don't even remember, honestly, because I think Xbox was getting some deals as well. I think Destiny had a bunch of PlayStation stuff, if I remember correctly. I don't know, Dan, like, I expected you to laugh when I told you. Do you have any other thoughts on this? I mean, we warned people this was going to happen. I think it's happened sooner than we thought. From what Jason Schreier is reporting, this actually was in the talks for a while, and they did an incredible job of keeping it secret, but that it actually was for a while. I mean, like, I don't know, anything else you think about, like, Sony owning Bungie, and do you think this is the last one? Because I really don't.
I mean, I think there are two ways to look at it. I think there's a possibility that if you're being optimistic, this could be the end of it. Like, they had to put it in military terms, they have their armed standoff, and now they'll just both go quiet for a while, or this is going to lead to acceleration, and I think that's probably what's going to happen.
You think acceleration is more likely than...
I hope I'm wrong, but...
Yeah, I mean, I think so as well. I think there's no doubt that Sony's talking to Square Enix, Konami, Capcom, Sega, and Ubisoft. They just bought Bungie, by the way, Dan, for $3.6 billion. And I think that all of these other ones, they can at least afford to get a couple others. I think who said it? I think Hogue said their limit is at least $5 billion, and they've only spent a little over half of that so far.
I guess we'll see. I actually do need to go, so this is the end of this short conversation that we can have it right now, I think.
All right, Dan. Well, I did want to get your candid laugh because I knew you'd have one. And thanks for calling in. And I guess I'll just talk a little longer without you, but we'll let you get back to work killing fish.
Frogs, but okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so it is frogs today. All right. Which is what Dan does, of course, as a geneticist. A joke. But all right. Bye, Dan.
Bye.
Yeah, and I guess from my perspective, though, other thing I want to add, the next thing I was going to bring up to Dan, if he could stay a little longer, but of course I'm glad he could talk at all stepping out of the lab today, is I just want to point out how stupid this is, though. And I don't mean for Sony. I think their hands were forced, and I don't even mean all the acquisitions are dumb. Like, you know, some of the smaller ones that Sony and Microsoft have made make sense. It feels like, yeah, that's a smaller studio. Now they'll get more funding. But these are giant studios that I just, you know, I guess before my big point, I'll say this too. I think there's no doubt that Sony is looking at two things. That, yes, they're probably going to give Bungie some games, you know, from their own catalog, or fund Bungie to really become an even bigger studio and make new games they probably didn't have the funding to do. But at the same time, there's no doubt they're going to keep making Destiny. They bought Bungie to have Destiny, and they're going to keep making Destiny for obvious financial reasons, the same way Activision's going to keep being a mostly Call of Duty factory. So I would hesitate any PlayStation fanboys. I would say, don't just say, oh, this means now Bungie's going to make this, and this. Something probably, but it's not like Activision is just going to stop forcing Raven to make a bunch of Call of Duty games and all of this other stuff. They're both going to keep making what they were making, I think. And it's going to be a while before we even know if they're making other stuff. Well, actually, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe they announce games 3 years ahead of time sometimes, so maybe they'll announce something to prove it. But anyways, the overall point I just want to make, now that this is officially an arms race Sony is firing back in, this is so inefficient for creativity, I think. Maybe I'll be wrong. And I said that in the bulk of the Broken Silicon that I think you'll already have heard. This will probably be cut in after that. You know, I think that there's a chance we could get to a world where Sony builds new studios and says, oh, now they have Call of Duty potentially, so we should revive Killzone and all these other things. I think there's a chance Sony does that, and then in response, Microsoft makes new studios as well. But I feel like more likely anything they were going to build on the side, they were already probably going to do eventually, both sides, Microsoft and Sony. And all this does is waste money, right? Think about, and again, like $70 billion for the Microsoft Activision acquisition. I've already talked that to death, how many things they could buy. I mean, even Sony's like, what is it? Yeah, $3.6 billion deal for Bungie. Think of how much it costs to make a game. They could make a new Bloodborne, a new Demon Souls, 3 new Spider-Man games, and reboot Killzone with that money. Like, that is $3.6 billion is enough for at least 6 games. Like, they could, and those are expensive games. You know, Sony could have used this money to make new studios and games. Microsoft could be using this money to make more things. Instead, this money was spent on stuff we were mostly already going to get. I could be wrong about that, but that's kind of a closing thought I have on this, is I just want to point out how inefficient it is for creativity. All of this money being thrown around really to get more chess pieces when they could have been making new chess pieces. Then they could have been making new things we could play. It sucks. I think Sony had no choice at this point, and I don't think it's over. I have no idea if Microsoft will try to buy EA or something next. You know, EA's kind of in the toilet too. Who knows? But I definitely don't think Sony's done, and I just wish it didn't come to this. But I think that's all I will say in this episode so far. I think it would be careless to keep talking about this before the dust has settled. You know, who knows if there's things that we already got wrong about it or something. But that is our initial take on it, and I thought it was worthwhile to add it to the episode. So, sorry, Gerard, but, you know, he did reach out and say he could handle this, and I just felt like it would be ridiculous if we didn't try to add an addendum to the episode before it went live. And to the patrons, sorry, it's coming out a few hours late. But anyways, back to the rest of the show. This piece of content is brought to you by Vite Ramen. For 2022, give yourself the gift of an easy-to-make-at-home meal that's healthy, reasonably priced, and above all else, actually tasty, so that you actually do eat a healthy meal. I eat it all the time, and it really tastes fantastic. It's so easy to either eat a packet by itself as a lunch, or you can put a couple of eggs in there while it's boiling, and, well, you can then have a hearty meal at the end of the day. Click the link in the description and use the offer code BrokenSilicon to save 10% off a special bundle just for Moore's Law Z fans that includes spoon, chopsticks, and more. This is a great deal for you, and it really does help the channel tremendously. Seriously, I eat it. It's good. They've been supporting Moore's Law Z for months, and you buying their product supports me. And you know what? You really should try to if you want a healthy and tasty snack to start out this year and maybe get rid of some of that holiday weight. Buy Vite Ramen today. All right, let us move on to the second story, finally. Bloomberg reports that Nvidia is quietly preparing to abandon the $40 billion ARM bid. Quoting from Bloomberg, Nvidia Corp is quietly preparing to abandon its purchase of ARM Ltd. from SoftBank Group after making little to no progress in winning approval for the $40 billion chip deal. According to people familiar with the matter that we have spoken with, Nvidia has told partners that it doesn't expect the transition to close, according to one person who asked not to be identified because the discussions are private, obviously. SoftBank, meanwhile, is stepping up preparation for an ARM initial public offering as an alternative to the Nvidia takeover, another person has told us as well. The purchase, poised to become the biggest semiconductor deal in history when it was announced in September of 2020, has drawn a fierce backlash from regulators in the chip industry itself, including ARM's own customers. The U.S. Federal Trade Commission sued to stop the transaction in December of 2021, arguing that Nvidia would become too powerful if it gained control over ARM's chip design. The acquisition has also faced resistance in China, where authorities are inclined to block the takeover if it wins approval elsewhere, according to one person. But they don't expect it to get that far, right? And it's funny. Of course, we just talked about this with Hogue Law, and I talked about this with Daniel Nenny. Again, links in the description for that one as well, where I think Daniel made an excellent point early on of just that really informed my overall opinion, I think, about half a year ago, where he's like, look, Yes, regulators in the EU are trying to block the deal. Yes, there's other people and regulators that will try to block the deal. But at the end of the day, here's what it comes down to. Apple doesn't want this to happen. Samsung doesn't want this to happen. Qualcomm doesn't want this to happen. AMD doesn't want this to happen. No one wants this to happen. And all these companies, any individual one fighting NVIDIA might lose. Although Apple's the strongest one, and now they're united fighting NVIDIA. And it's like, if all of these people are going to continue to make phone calls, work together, look into ways to make this hard for NVIDIA, that at the end of the day, it's probably not going to go through for that reason. I think that's point number one. Before we even get into what Bloomberg said here, I think point number two, though, is the FTC blocking it just pretty much killed it. And Hogue pointed out that the EU paused their investigation only because they're busy. And it's like, yeah, why would the EU regulation bodies keep going full steam ahead with this type of block or investigation, whatever, as long as the Americans are going even harder at it when they can work on other, anti-competitive regulations as well. And then if the U.S. stops working on it, then we'll just go back to it. And he made it clear that the U.K. was on board as well. Now, this Bloomberg brings up China. So let me get this straight. If the FTC fails, then they have to deal with the EU, then the U.K., then China, all individually blocking it. And something I brought up to Hogue on the last podcast was, if I was an old-timey steel baron, I might do 20 years of fighting to try to get something that would make me a monopoly. It'd be worth it. Who cares? But in the technology industry, I'm not even sure how useful ARM will be to them if they can't do anything special without owning them for 20 years. So, and I don't, It wouldn't be 20, but it'd probably be 10 or 5 or 10 years. And that's just an eternity in this industry. I really think you don't need Bloomberg to say this. I think this deal's dead.
Yeah. I mean, this deal, I forgot how long this deal has been discussed before. Like, I guess it was September 2020, how time flies. And it's felt dead in the water. Like, I feel like since a couple months after it was announced, because there's just too many forces that don't want it to happen. And the fact that they bring up China doesn't want it to happen is kind of a thought I'd really never thought of before. Of course, they wouldn't want that to happen either. They make a bunch of ARM-based stuff too. And I don't know if you know this, Tom, the U.S. and China don't have the greatest relations right now. I don't think they would want a U.S. company to own ARM.
Yeah, and x86. Because then Intel and AMD own that, and NVIDIA. So, and those are,
Like, the two most powerful governments in the world don't want this, are going to make sure this gets blocked.
I've heard Russia wanted to as well. So, I mean, like, you literally have 5 massive, this isn't going through. And NVIDIA knows it at this point, is basically what I think this article shows.
Yeah, and how much money are you going to sink into this for a deal that might not even happen? Like, I think they've already sunk a couple billion into it, and at a certain point, it's just not worth spending more money for a thing that probably won't happen.
One thing I also have to bring up that a contact of mine pointed out is, you understand that if NVIDIA were to fight this with the FTC, they would have to go to court. And then it is the FTC's job, because they wouldn't sue this. They would not sue NVIDIA unless they saw it as a likely anti-competitive move. Mm-hmm. So to prove their point, they're now going to go to court and spend days arguing in recordings about how NVIDIA has been anti-competitive in the past and that they shouldn't be allowed to do this in the future. Do you think NVIDIA wants there to be a public court battle where one side is just bringing up every time NVIDIA has been anti-competitive in the past and then goes, maybe we should look into that one too,
There's that. And just from a public consciousness perspective, I think there's some anti-competitive stuff they've done that doesn't necessarily rise to the deal of being monopolistic, but why can't I think of what it was called?
The GPP, GeForce Partner Program.
Yeah, their black box gaming tool where they just nerf performance for AMD graphics cards in some games.
And their own, but mostly AMD. Any nerfing they do is just nerfs their own 5%, but nerfs AMD 20.
Yeah, it's not a good look, and I think a lot of people have kind of forgotten about that happening because AMD was in a bad position at the time anyway, so no one cared about them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this overall just isn't good for Nvidia at a certain point.
It's not worth spending billions to have your laundry thrown on display in front of everybody, your dirty laundry. Like that's what it really comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
And then to go, okay, and then we're gonna have to do that in the EU and then the UK and then China. Good luck. It's a communist country. They can just say, well, whatever, you can't come here. And then they already have worry, and RISC-V's right there waiting for everyone to use if ARM was taken away. It's dumb.
No, that's true.
It almost makes me wonder what they thought would happen if they thought, oh, let's just see if we can get this through. But yeah, I think it's just so painful. I thought late last year, I thought like almost certainly dead. When I saw the FTC thing, I was like 99% dead after like thinking about all of the other bodies outside of the FTC and the EU just getting in line to spank Nvidia, a big old spanking line, if I may make that metaphor. I don't. Yeah, it's like right now the Nvidia ARM deal. If you've seen Airplane, is that old lady who's hysterical, and the FTC is the one getting to slap her first, and then next is the EU, and then next is going to be the UK, and then next will be China, then Russia. Then I think that's what it's just a line of people shaking this old lady and slapping her. And why would you sign up for that, even if you survive it? Let us then move on to story number 3. RTX 3050 launches, Nvidia Rickrolls reviewers again. And yep, that's what I titled this write-up that I passionately put down here. This week, Nvidia launched an imaginary graphics card that, as usual, Rickrolled the gaming community. In summary, Nvidia pretended they had a 6500 XT competitor. They named it the 3058 gigabyte. The card performed exactly like a 1660 Ti with 8 gigabytes, including the same efficiency, actually, if you look it up. Nvidia launched the card with near zero stock at prices 50% higher than MSRP, and yet, because of this fake MSRP, it got better reviews than its AMD counterpart that you can actually buy. Indeed, though Nvidia positioned its card in marketing as a 1660 Ti replacement that crushes the 6500 XT, the reality is on the street, and I mean just in real life, it is priced like the far superior RX 6600. This is a 6600 competitor, not a 6500 XT competitors, and frankly, reviewers fell for it again. Most disturbing about the situation is the fact that the initial launch is made up of GA106 cards cut down an absurd amount, including PCIe lanes, to GA107 RTX 3050 Ti laptop specs. This card was clearly a rushed publicity stunt, done because Nvidia couldn't have GA107 desktop cards ready anytime soon. In other words, every 3050 desktop card sold could have been a 3066 gigabyte that was stronger and cost Nvidia less to make. It has been proven by Moore's Law is Dead and Gamer's Nexus that Nvidia had trouble making the 3066 gigabyte profitable for $250 in 2020, and now they are pretending they could make an 8 gigabyte card with recent shortages for that price in 2022. There's no way around it. The fact is that this card is impossible to sell at $250 based on years old info, and yet reviewers acted like it might actually be $250, like waiting and seeing was required at all. Seriously, and again, I need to emphasize this, guys. Not just me, Gamers Nexus, and I think after that it was backed up by more sources. I forgot who, more websites as well. They couldn't make a GA106 card, which is what this uses right now, profitable with 6 gigabytes. For $250 in 2020. How the hell are they doing that with 8 gigabytes with current component pricing? They can't. And the fact that anyone ever pretended it would blows my mind. Anyways, in fact, Moore's Law is Dead has spoken to multiple distributors showing they received RX 6500 XTs for about $220, and they typically then plan to sell them for $250 to $270. So just so you know, guys, on Newegg, those 6500 XTs for $270, they're typically paying, I don't know, between $215 and $230 for them. And from what I've seen from purchases, it's about $400 to have a 3050 delivered to your Micro Center right now. And that's why you're seeing them sold for $420. So I just had to make that point very clear as well. I'm not sure. I mean, we did a whole die shrink talking about it. It's out there for patrons. I think it's really, really good. And I think this is making us think, Dan, about should we do a die shrink on the idea of what should even need to be the volume for a product to exist. Like, can Nvidia make one 3090 Ti and then pretend that card exists? Because frankly, it doesn't. I think that's another question to ask. But I brought that up. I've read this big old write-up. I'm clearly still mad about it. What did you think of the whole situation, Dan? What did you think of what I just said?
Well, I mean, the 3090 Ti is the evidence I have for the card's existence is a video from a couple weeks ago of a guy holding up a card that looks like a 3090 to me. I'm not saying they don't have 3090 Ti's. It's just like, that's the evidence I have for its existence. I don't know what a real product is. I think I brought this up. The inception of that idea is me bringing it up. Like, what is a real product? Like, at what point can we call a product? Because I guess I will say with the 3050, you can buy it on Newegg right now, Tom, for the low price of $640. Oh, $600 is the lowest price 3050 on Newegg right now. So in some ways, it's almost in between a 6600 and 6600 XT competitor based on pricing, if you ask me. This is hilarious to me. The 6500 XT, I'll say availability seems to be drying up a little bit based on what I checked today. Prices seem to be drifting upwards towards $300.
But there's still a $270 model there right now.
It's ASRock, though, and those aren't very good, I don't think.
No, it's Power Color.
Oh, it is Power.
And I did see an ASRock one come in stock for $200 a few days ago. Of course, that one sold out immediately, which is what you should actually buy that card at if you have to buy it, which again, I say half. It's the only reason you're getting this card is you have to. I wouldn't pay $270 personally. Again, though, unless there's really no other choice, though. But go on, though. Sorry.
But what I'm trying to say, though, is yes, the 3050 was launched positioned against the 3050 and at their respective MSRPs. The 3050 is obviously the better card to buy, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. It's 25% more. Yeah, 25% more money. About that much more powerful, and it has more RAM. Okay, that makes sense. I don't think it's 2.45 times more expensive than a 6500 XT, which is what it's currently selling for. And if you're desperate for a card and you're looking to spend that much money, buy a 6600 XT or buy a 6600, because you can get a 6600 for about, let me check. You can get a 6600 for $150 cheaper currently, or you can spend $130 more and get a 6600 XT. Get one of those.
Yeah,
like that's almost seems to be what's going on. Is the release of both of these cards have made the 6600 look like a good thing to buy. And I don't think it is. I don't think you should spend $480 on a 6600, but frankly, if you're looking for quote-unquote low end, that's the best you have.
Yeah, and if you're in 1080p, that one performs. And it overclocks well, performs fine. It's not great, but that's, yeah. I mean, and I'm just looking out here, and I don't think, do I have here? Yeah, okay. So actually, let me skip to this reader mail right here then, because I'm stumbling across something Googling here. Carno Sagata writes in, "Hi, Tom. In a video on January 27th, you referred to the RTX 3050 as an imaginary friend. The launch, a publicity stunt, and the MSRP as unsustainable. Well, it's not, unless you call me and Gamers Nexus and I think DigiTimes and someone else a liar. Like, we know they can't profit with that card at that price. But anyways, let's imagine that quarter one passes and you have data from the quarter in your hands. What sort of numbers would you expect to see that would prove your point? Perhaps total worldwide shipments of 100,000 or so, about 0.2% of the market, prices above 320 even if the mining market crashes. What sort of numbers would you expect for the 6500 XT? 200,000 plus sold, and for the 3050 my estimate would be 10 to 40,000, with probably being in the middle of that based on the numbers I've seen reported in some areas. And in terms of like, when would I expect to say I'm right? I'm looking at this right now, and the closest Micro Center to me right now, which is in Marietta, Georgia, it says 25 plus Power Color 6500 XT in stock for $260. So it's available. And the debate about this is done.
I think I can't speak to how many of either of these cards are being produced.
They have more in Georgia than all 3050s ever made.
I know you probably, because I'm just saying I don't have any concept of how much they made, because this isn't my job. I know you and other people that do this full time probably have closer to a realistic idea of what might be being produced. But the fact of the matter is, it is so evident that the 3050 is being undersupplied compared to the 6500 XT. It's impossible that it isn't.
And they don't expect any more shipments of them in most. I mean, there will be a couple dropping. People need to remember some of them, just like the 6500 XT, were delayed because of logistics issues right now. But basically, after this month, don't expect any to drop.
Yeah, and maybe what's going on is, who knows, they're being supplied in equal numbers. Maybe there's twice as many 6500 XTs or something, and there's about equal demand or something. So the price for the 6500 XT is just remaining lower. I mean, you should just be buying a 6500 XT still. Over a
$600 3050, I would think so, yeah.
Because clearly the 3050 is not being received by the market as $250. It is somehow being received by the market as a $600 card, which is bizarre to me how people are making purchasing decisions, because you can get a stronger card for cheaper right now that has more RAM.
Well, I mean, at that point, you're getting above the price of a 6600 XT, which in 1080p comes close to a 3060 Ti. I mean, I don't even know what you're doing anymore.
Yeah, that's what I said. Like at this point, if pricing for the 3050 doesn't start to decline at a certain point, you could make an argument this is a 6600 XT competitor based on how it's priced.
And Micro Center, they have 25 plus 6600 XTs in stock in Marietta, Georgia for $540. I mean, I guess if you're not a high-resolution gamer, even if you are, this is stronger slightly than a 3060 and 1440p. This is the card to get. And it does show that this is improving. It's just not going to improve for the 3050 because it's not a card they can profitably make at that price, so they're not going to make it.
Yeah. So my advice for you is, if you're desperate for a card, clearly the best option is a used 1650 Super off of eBay. You can maybe fetch one for like $225 if you're lucky, maybe $250, or the 6500 XT. Those are, in my opinion, literally your two choices. If you're looking to spend any more, but you don't want to get into the crazy expensive range, the 6600 seems to be the best choice on the market right now. I don't know how much there is to say about my opinion, because the opinion is self-evident.
Yeah, and I
don't think there's a counter to that opinion. The 6600 is cheaper, stronger, and unambiguously stronger too,
and much more readily available, at least in the U.S. Again, I know you're going to write in from Denmark and say I can't get it. Okay, I don't check all hundreds of countries that are out there. I'm sorry, but at least in the U.S., guys, and at least from what I've also actually seen in Australia and the U.K. as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what else there really is to say about this either. I think what really annoys me is just how predictable it was, how obvious it is this isn't going to be its price, and how AMD got burned for just being honest about the price of their shitty graphics card. I mean, look, it's shitty. And again, it's like, do I have to? Like, yeah, duh. Let's talk about self-evident. I know. But it also is the option. And me and you were talking about this the other night, how the 1650 Super's price on eBay is drifting lower. It's because now there's at least some standard, maybe a shitty standard, but a standard in the market bringing down prices between $200 to $300. That card is not the 3050. It's not helping the market at all.
Yeah, because a card on the market already exists that fulfills its need, and it's the 6600.
Yeah. Well, and let me say this, and AMD is not a charity. AMD's making money. AABs are making money on every 6500 XT sold, but they're not making a crazy amount of money. And it's important that they make some money, because otherwise they wouldn't make it. Nvidia is not making the 3050. And there's two ways you can run a business. Both ways are trying to make as much money as possible. One is being honest about pricing, saying this is what it costs us to make it, and we're going to make as many of them as we can, because they do make us money each one sold. That's AMD. Or you can lie about the price and push people to try to buy $1,000 3070s. And that's all I'm saying is, it's like when people say, oh, we can't accept these prices. No, okay, but what you're accepting is these companies lying to you. And now I've heard, and we'll get to it soon, rumors that AMD is considering removing MSRP on future products, just like Nvidia has for their last two launches. And it's because it would benefit them more, it turns out, if you get lied to. Apparently people want to be lied to.
Yeah, I guess that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
I mean, imaginary best friend. That's a good way to put it.
Indeed. QH Freddy writes in, you reported Nvidia halting or lowering GPU production. Yeah, in late October, wasn't it? They said that happened. I can't say that that's still the case, but could it have been only 30 series production? I think that's what I said, QH. And could they have been shifting production to another thing like the 16 series instead to push back against the 6600 or 6500? So my understanding is the RTX 2060 12 gigabyte is a new production run, with some people suggesting it's to keep a good relationship with TSMC, because you never want to have a situation where your production at them dries up completely, which I know people are like, well, they still make new 1650 products. A lot of those might just be stockpiled dies, though. To answer your question, though, keep in mind, anything they make now, component prices are up, so it costs more than it would have cost in the past, at least a couple of years ago. I don't know if at the 2060 launch. And yes, they could have done this, but to actually help the market, they wouldn't have made a 2060 12 gigabyte mining card. They would have made a 2060 6 gigabyte that they can put at a $300 MSRP and actually spit out in high numbers, which I think they could have. Now, I don't know exactly how they would have done it, but I think they probably could have made something that's the equivalent of a 2060 Super 6 gigabyte, which is what the 12 gigabyte is, just with 12 gigabytes. And that would have performed just below it would have been almost a 2070. I almost wonder if yields actually would be good enough where they could even enable it more than a 20. Like, I wonder, could they have called it like a 2060 Ti 6 gigabyte? I don't know. Like, could it have been something with more CUDA cores than the 2060 Super, but only 6 gigabytes to save on costs? I think they could have done that. I think they would have had the yields. And I think if they would have done that and sold it at $300, it would have profoundly helped the market. And I would have said, everyone ignore the 6500 XT. Get the actually $300 2060 Ti 6 gigabyte or whatever it would have been called. They just didn't do that.
Yeah. And I guess I don't know the whole pricing debate, but if they could have released something like that at $300, that's at least an attempt at the low end. Even if it's not the greatest attempt, it may be the best one they could have made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, or just rebrand it and call it the 3040, or just call it a 2060 Ti or something goofy, actually. But yeah. All right, let's move on then. I don't know how long this will be, but I think we have to bring it up at least once because it technically falls within this news cycle, Dan, to discuss with you. The ARC 6500 XT 4 gigabyte launched. Of course, this is clearly a post-launch discussion. I've done videos. We've talked about it in Die Shrinks. I've talked about it in Loose Ends. I don't think we need to discuss it much, but do you have anything left to say about the 6500 XT launch?
I think we mostly covered it in the 3050 portion of this episode because, once again, it's not overall that interesting of a product. It's a product that in previous years of something like this, the equivalent product, if it were at least in 2019 or something, probably would have cost
140 or something.
140, $150. No one would really care about it. It's like, yep, that's the low-end card. And that's what it would be. The fact of the matter is, I think this is just the card that for some reason, made everyone realize how bad things are compared to previous years. Mm-hmm. And all of the reception, although I have to say, the fact that it only has 4 PCIe lanes is stupid. The fact that it doesn't have encode, less stupid, in my opinion, but still not good.
If you want to hear the whole encoding discussion, listen to the Die Shrink.
But if they would have released that at $140, no one would be talking about it, but they can't release it at $140 because they would be losing money on the card. So this is what we have. Buy this if you need to buy a card, or if you can get a used like 1650 or better card for less money, which I did digging, the best you're going to get on the used market.
Yeah. I mean, there's an argument to be made, and again, it's not what I want them to do, nor am I saying they necessarily will do it, but I have to assume they're thinking about it. Should they have just said this is 140, do it Nvidia doesn't have like 10 cards at MSRP instead of like 100,000, and then like just have it be there for like 1 second that there were 10 of them you could have gotten for 140, and then let the price shoot up to 300. with scalpers, which again, I mean, people are really not acknowledging enough how much this has burned scalpers. We talked about that too, Dan.
Yeah.
I checked eBay, and there were people trying to sell scalp 6500 XTs for 600. None of them moved. I'm tired of people sending me links to that, guys. Just because something's listed for a price doesn't mean anyone bought it. I can list a 6500 XT for 10 grand. Does that mean it's selling on eBay for 10 grand? Fuck no. You know, and now those scalpers have lowered the price to like $300, and I'm just laughing my ass off. They're going to lose money on this, so maybe scalpers are starting to learn a message here too. But yeah, you do wonder, should AMD just do what Nvidia did, like pretend the price is lower, sell one card at that price, let the price shoot up to double what it really is, and then just walk away? I don't know, and I'm not sure they will do that, but I don't know. I'm starting to wonder.
I think this just speaks to the tendency, at least in my opinion, of the market, or how people receive the market in general, is, frankly, I think AMD is fighting an uphill battle with messaging with anything they do. Like, if you ask me, if the AMD and Nvidia released identical products for the same amount of money, the AMD product would be worse reviewed because... or if not official reviews, all the comments on Reddit would still be saying you should get the Nvidia one instead. And it's just like, I don't know what AMD should do at this point, because I think if AMD did try to do that, it would be criticized. And, you know, like the obvious moves, like launching a card with no MSRP, have been pretty heavily criticized on Nvidia's end. But that's a huge, insane move.
Cole Addict writes in, "Hi, Tom, Dan, and Steve." Well, Steve's not here, Cole Addict, so I'm not sure what's happening. Although I think he will be coming on again to discuss, well, hopefully more interesting products than this. You know, I'm not going to invite him on again, but we have been talking offline, and he'll probably be on later this year. As I believe the demographic most likely to buy the 6500 XT is holdouts whose cards are dying and can neither wait nor buy a higher tier model. And that group is guaranteed to be working with PCIe 3.0. Why did I say it like a Canadian? 3.0. Do you agree that this release will do more long-term harm to the brand's reputation than it can compensate with servicing this market segment demand right now? I think right now there's an argument they shouldn't have launched this. I think I'm inclined to think that whatever you think, that the launch should have been entirely different. Should they have not launched it at all? I don't know if I agree with that. Do I think this will do long-term damage to their brand? I don't know. I've actually reached out to a few AMD sources out of curiosity, and the general read I get right now is they're not sure if it's a mistake yet, but at least in the short term, they're like, fuck reviewers, the card's selling, you know? And
if it's selling, I guess, I think it could do some damage to AMD as a brand, though. Yeah,
but I don't know, you know? I think it's too early to say for sure. One thing that I would say, though, the PCIe 3.0 thing, yeah, I think people forget, you know, that this isn't just for people with old systems. I mean, let me see here. Creoch Freddy writes in again, and he says, what do AIBs think of the 6500 XT? Do they, or AMD for that matter, expect to sell a lot of them? Do they expect it to be a very short run and have the 6600 replace it soon? What do they think of the impact DG2 will have on the 6500 XT? And I like this question because I just want to make something clear to people. AIBs don't like when they're pushed to sell a card they make less money on, but they do see it as an opportunity to gain mindshare. Like Sapphire specifically would say, oh, yeah, I mean, we'd rather sell 6700 XT, but we're not just gaining mindshare for AMD if we sell a bunch of these. We're gaining Sapphire mindshare if we, you know, and that's true. You know, I get a Sapphire card and I like it. I go, I'm more likely to get Sapphire in the future. You know, and they see this as an important thing to do before ARC launches. Also, OEMs I talk to love this card. And that's because, I just don't know how many times I need to say this, they were putting 1050 Ti's and 1650s for like $300 plus in pre-builts. Now they can put the 6500 XT. And guys, Zen 3 supports PCIe 4.0. Alder Lake supports PCIe 5.0, actually. You know, even cheap Alder Lake boards have 4.0. So OEMs absolutely love the 6500 XT because now they can put a $200 entry option into their desktops that isn't weaker than a 1650, and it performs in a lot of games if you lower some settings, actually pretty close to a 1660 Super. So OEMs love it. They also love it because they can actually buy it. I've heard that getting 1650s to like be put in a Dell computer is a pain in the ass because they actually don't make a lot of them anymore, if any.
Yeah.
And so the fact that they can actually buy these up in the tens of thousands every month and then ship them out, I mean, this is a dream for OEMs. And that now they can actually do entry-level pre-builds. So, again, the way the do-it-yourself community is reacting, AIBs and OEMs do not feel the same way. And I think that's something that people need to understand. And from that perspective, I think AMD is probably happy, too, is they're like, dude, most of our sales are through OEMs anyways.
Yeah, it's important to note that I do think over time the DIY market gets more and more popular, but it's important to note that it's still not the majority of the PC community.
Yeah.
By any means.
Annual Chief writes in, about the 6500 XT debacle, didn't AMD adopt a somewhat similar strategy at the Radeon 7, with it being a cut-down chip for a different use? I'll buy in a different market with a different product, I suppose. That was high-end. This is low-end this time. These were the early days when people were clamoring for high-end competition, and then AMD wanted something to counter turn, and they launched the Radeon 7. I kind of see the 6500 XT as being the opposite strategy, except, that it's in the low end in a very crappy market, and it's a mobile chip cranked to 11, missing several features. What do you feel AMD should learn from these experiences, both the Radeon 7 and the 6500 XT, if you agree with the comparison, and trying to repurpose chips in both high and low end to address tomorrow's market at the last minute? I love this question because it is directly comparable to the Radeon 7, which that one they made no money on the first month of sales. I believe by the time, they didn't make that many of them in general, but after the first few months, they actually were making money on each one sold. That is worth mentioning. I think about $100 profit or so. And so, yeah, I think this is interesting. I think the way to answer this question is, Dan, do you think the Radeon 7, its reviews weren't as bad as the 6500 XT, so it's not directly comparable. But I do remember similar takes by reviewers of this is a weird card that the market didn't need for $700. And it's like, I don't know. It's a 16 gigabyte 2080 without ray tracing. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. And I mean, the idea that it did a lot of damage, the Radeon 7 would have done a possibly comparable amount of damage to the brand of AMD, I don't think is true, because I think the Radeon 7 is honestly a card most people kind of forget about because, like you said, it's an interesting card. It was kind of expensive. They didn't make like any of them, if I'm remembering correctly. So
for the initial launch, it was a very, very small. It wasn't as bad as Ampere, but it was maybe twice as many as like the 3080, 3090 launch.
Mm-hmm. Which for the market it was serving, that's probably. I don't think you need as many 3090s as you do lower performing markets. But I think. From their perspective, like, I think AMD is just kind of a smaller company, so to an extent they have to repurpose their stuff more, and as they get more money, it would be good if they stop doing that, probably, because every once in a while you get a weird product that doesn't quite make sense, like the 6500 XT. Radeon 7, I think it was a complete graphics card, and it made sense for some people to buy, so I think it's, I guess, uncomparable in that way, where there's, in my opinion, no like huge flaws with the Radeon 7, aside from maybe not having ray tracing. But
yeah, I do think there is a point here that the lesson to be learned is put more thought into the messaging. Like, again, I think we talked about this in the die shrink. What AMD should have said in hindsight with the 6500 XT, they should have been more upfront about the PCIe issue, and they shouldn't have said step up to your 1080p gaming. It should have been, you can build now. Like, look at Zen 3 prices. They're cheaper than ever. These have PCIe 4.0. Now you can buy a card to put into your system that you can upgrade later that doesn't completely suck. That should have been the marketing. Build now. Yeah. Build a new Zen 3 system. Zen 3 prices are cheaper. But yeah, like, messaging this is something to upgrade a low-end system that might not have 4.0 is a complete blunder by them, and stupid. It's stupid, dumb.
Yeah, go faster with your card that performs identically to the card with the same name from 2 years ago.
Yeah, that was a dumb way to put it. There's no way around it. And I think, yeah, even other products too. Like when I look at Rembrandt, and it's like 12 compute units, maybe 20% better CPU performance, I think, at most than Cezanne. You go, is that much better, though, at CPU? And is the GPU good enough to really be only the thing in your gaming system when we already have other things coming out soon stronger? Like, wouldn't it have been smarter for AMD to have made a new APU that had 16 compute units and some Infinity Cache, or maybe even 24 compute units and some Infinity Cache, and only 6 cores? And then also made a separate one that has 8 cores and maybe not 12 RDNA 2 compute units, but 6, so that you make the die smaller because they're not even using it half the time. They need to start doing that. And same with this, like the Navi 24, to not give it 8 PCIe lanes is, I'm not defending it. I am saying they don't have that because it was never meant to be done with anything but paired with Rembrandt and Alder Lake. But you'd think they might have foresight to go, maybe it will be used for something else, and they should have given it 8 PCIe lanes. I'm not saying they shouldn't have. I'm just explaining to you why they couldn't fix that at the last minute. That type of stuff needs to stop. And that's why I'm like, why didn't they just give it an encoder, like make it 10% bigger? Whatever, dude. Maybe you won't just use this in laptops.
I mean, I don't disagree. I think this is the ultimate highlight of that design philosophy backfiring.
Mm-hmm.
But it might keep happening in the future, and they should avoid that if they can.
Yeah, and I guess we should probably move on to another story about repurposing already designed things. Story number 5, AMD Radeon RX 6950 XT, 6850 XT, 6750 XT, RDNA 2 refresh graphics cards rumored to launch in quarter 2. And I'm quoting here somewhat from WCCF Tech, while also adding my own editorialization to it. According to the latest rumors coming from ChipHell's WJM47196, it is reported that AMD's RDNA 2 refresh is coming out in quarter 2 2022 and will feature a brand new branding similar to the new mobile outings. There are 2 dies currently mentioned to be updated, Navi 21 and Navi 22. Few details are confirmed, but at the very least 18 gigabit per second memory seems to be all but guaranteed, which makes sense. That is becoming a new standard and is already included on the low-end 6500 XT. Surely AMD can afford it then also on their high-end models. The big question remains, though, if AMD will use 6 nanometer for these refreshes. If they do, they could push clocks another 10 to 20%, and AMD could have a lineup that, at least on paper, is very hard for Nvidia to compete with, especially with the 3090 Ti literally not existing. I want to be told, by the way, guys, I know, like other people, I think Anthony Greff at Tweaktown first leaked that 3090 Ti is delayed. I want to be very clear that my contacts, when they've asked NVIDIA about when the 3090 Ti is coming out, they were told not for the foreseeable future, meaning months. And there's no date, so I don't even know if it's coming out till right before Lovelace. I don't know, guys. Anyways, though, continuing the write-up, the only worrisome thought is this, then. Will AMD give these cards an MSRP? Well, as long as that isn't sure, especially after seeing the lack of criticism NVIDIA is getting from the community, will they flagrantly lie about pricing or remove it entirely from products like the 3080 12GB and 2060 12GB, and from what I am told, by the way, possibly the 3090 Ti as well? Why would AMD not do this? And it's something to worry about. All right, so what do you think about these rumored cards? And, I guess I will, before I throw it to you, throw out there one reason this becomes a main story. On this channel, we've been covering others' leaks a little less sometimes just because I don't want to cover things I can't verify myself. Well, I didn't leak this, but I can verify that based on what I'm told, this is almost entirely correct, or most of it as of now is true. These cards really are coming probably quarter 2 with at least that memory. So, yeah, what do you think, Dan?
I think longer generations are more likely to require a refresh, whether they want to kind of rebrand that as a new line like AMD has historically done, or do what NVIDIA has moved to with just calling things the Super when they want to refresh it. It's the same difference. As far as performance goes, these will probably be 5 to 15% stronger than whatever card they...
I think it can easily be 10% stronger, honestly, all of them. Maybe more.
Than whatever. But, in that range, it's not like it's a new generation, but, if you held off, congrats, you get a bit more performance for the 6750 XT instead of the 6700. So from that perspective, I think it just kind of makes sense that they would launch slightly stronger cards. I don't know what the ultimately they're going to do with specs, with the exception of them likely using 18 gigabit RAM, which that alone will give it some more performance. So the only real thing to talk about is pricing, and as you said, will they remove MSRP? I don't know. It seems like they could. I haven't seen anything from AMD marketing that says that this is a thing they're going to do yet, but it seems to be maybe get less derision than releasing a card that's the market sees it's too expensive.
Well, and let me point this out, that at the end of the day, prices are up by quite a lot to make these cards. And I've this in the wrap up, but I'll get to it now. Like, Nvidia has raised the price on their founders cards by 6% in Europe. So they've just literally raised prices. Like, I just think AMD can discontinue their old cards and at least raise MSRP. They can launch a 6.8. I'm not saying I want them to, again, guys, but they can launch. I mean, look at all the 6950 XTs on Newegg are selling for at least. I'm sorry, the 6900 XTs on eBay right now, I think, or on Newegg right now, I think are selling for at least 1500, or usually around 1700. So if that's the case, why doesn't AMD just launch a 6950 XT that's at least 10% stronger with an MSRP of 1200, the same price as the 3080 Ti? Why not? You know,
yeah.
And then actually try to have it hit MSRP. Why not launch a 6850 XT that's like has an MSRP of like $899? Actually, the price, a lot of 3080s are selling for far more than that, you know, but then actually try to hold that price. They might as well, you know, and launch it as a new model if they can, because, you know, you buy up RAM in bulk. And I think it's obvious that they are, especially what I'm hearing from some console tweaks that might be coming, by the way, guys, that 18 gigabit per second is becoming the standard, and a lot of companies are buying up that speed in bulk right now. And so if AMD is buying up basically only 18 gigabit per second, kind of like it seems like they mostly only bought 16 gigabit for RDNA 2's initial launches, why not? Why not do that? And I don't know if they even need 6 nanometer. Let's be honest here. Most of the coolers on these cards are way over engineered, and it's not like they'll have reference models for these most likely. So why can't they just, even if it's still on 7 nanometer, clock the 6950 XT at like 2.7 gigahertz with 13% more bandwidth, and they just laugh away the 3090? You know, why not? Why not do that? Like, there's really no reason not to launch these cards, even if it isn't on 6 nanometer.
Yeah, and I think you see Nvidia doing this more. Like, if they see a position in the market, or if they see a configuration they can release, fuck it. Who cares if it actually makes our product stack look clean? We can hold a stronger card. We can make a stronger card, and we can release it for a price. Let's just make slightly more money, or hopefully, in AMD's case, let's release something that kills a product. And I don't know why anything would hold MSRP, so I think that might be wishful thinking, but hopefully it can hold MSRP better than whatever Nvidia launches at any given price, because there's so many cards in their stack at this point, it's hard to remember.
Well, and you know, Zen 3 is getting a lot of competition right now, and they have this wafer capacity on 7 nanometer and 6 nanometer that they can use. You know, ARC's about to launch. You almost wonder why not, like, it says Q2, like, why not a month before ARC comes out to desktop, just launch a whole lineup that actually has more of the wafer capacity diverted for RDNA 2, whether on 6 or 7 nanometer. And you just launch a lineup that maybe they raise MSRP, but the MSRP actually holds. You actually have a 6850 XT that's basically 1% weaker than a 6900 XT for like $799 MSRP, but it's actually at that price. And a 6750 XT that is almost as strong as the top ARC card, and they just launch it for $550. You know, like, why not do this and then just a month before ARC comes out, have a better entire product stack with high availability and just strike on this market? Similar to kind of what Nvidia has been doing to AMD. Why not AMD just eventually do this now that they have an opening? And again, there's really nowhere to go for Nvidia here. They can't overclock any of these cards more. I mean, the best they can do is maybe bring some 3070 with GA103, which we're about to get to. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's clear that Ampere at least is being is really being milked for all of its worth as far as as far as performance goes, as they really just stopped caring about how much power these cards are consuming. So yeah, you probably can't make a 3080 Ti clock much far higher than what it's doing now.
Unless you want to use 400 watts.
Yeah. And that's the other thing you say, like, about Arc. Although I don't think it's as big of a talking point anymore. Like, really, Intel Arc is going to be that strong when it comes out?
Yes.
I don't think that's discussed anymore, but, like, AMD and Nvidia, if they can, will do something to position their products against them. And Arc is coming a year and a half. Maybe. I'm not sure when Arc is coming out at this point. A year and a half.
There's a leak coming
RDNA
up. It's going to be weird. Look, guys, it's coming out Q2. They'll probably paper launch something in Q1, but some of the products you thought were coming in Q2 are coming way later than you think, as I've already told you, Dave. But and don't take that to mean what I think a lot of you think it means. It's not like, oh no, their high end won't be out. No, that's not what I'm talking about. It's just some really specific things are coming later than expected, it seems. And well, we'll get to that in that video, though. Amiable Chief writes in, you've been saying for a while now that AMD fully expects to take the graphics crown with RDNA 3. Assuming that does turn out to be true, do you still feel AMD may not assign a concrete MSRP to the lineup? I feel like, if nothing else, any figure, no matter how high it is, shows the market that they are back in the reckoning with top-tier performance and a top-tier price, which would not be apparent if they fail to anchor the product to an MSRP. As we all well know, NVIDIA's lack of MSRP is nothing more than a shameless opportunistic cash grab. Bonus question, before this behavior starts normalizing, does the FTC step in? No. To that question, let's get out of the way. I don't think so. I don't see anything on the horizon going on with AMD and NVIDIA that would cause that yet. But I do think that's an interesting point, that if they don't give it an MSRP, it's hard for them to brag about their new lineup.
Yeah, that is a good point. Saying this is the tier we're competing in is kind of necessary, and without an MSRP, you're almost not making that declaration. Where I guess when the 3080 Ti was announced without an MSRP, we knew... You
mean 3080 12 gigabyte, which is as strong as the 3080 Ti?
Once again, like I said earlier, I'm starting to forget which products are which because there are so many with similar names in that product stack. Yeah, the 3080 12 gigabyte, we knew what the MSRP was. It was already kind of anchored to that point. We knew what it was basically going to sell for within a couple $100.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I think that's a good point. And it does make me go, no, I think they will have MSRP, especially because by the time RDNA 3 is out, I do believe prices will be down low enough. I don't think they're going to not launch MSRP with RDNA 3, probably, at first. But I think that's probably the best argument I made for why they wouldn't do that. But I think for sure you're going to see... the pricing just be 30% higher than last gen. But maybe performance doubles, and so at least it feels good, unlike Ampere and RDNA 2, which you couldn't buy because of demand and then mining on the Ampere side. And yeah. Today's video is brought to you by CDKOffer.com. Whether you're looking to get good deals on PlayStation, Microsoft Office Professional, or both Windows 10 and Windows 11 operating systems, CDKOffer.com has you covered. CDK is a long-term sponsor of Moore's Law is Dead, and that's because they have been consistently providing me and Moore's Law is Dead's fans with a service that I think PC gaming just needs: reasonable operating system and Microsoft Word prices. We all have to use these products, and we don't need to overpay for them if you use CDKeyOffer.com. And you know what? I know I will be using these products later this year for a new Raptor Lake or Zen 4 system, most likely, and I will do so knowing that, well, they're all legitimate keys, and they are going to be delivered to me quickly and promptly when I buy them. Don't waste any more money than you need to this year. Use the link in the description or on screen to go to CDKeyOffer.com, and when you're there, whatever you decide to buy, make sure you use one of these offer codes. Broken Silicon gets you 25% off all Windows products, and Daishin gets you 3% off everything else. And this really does help the channel. It helps you save money. Use these offer codes. Use the link. Go to CDKeyOffer.com today. So, okay, let's move on then to story number 6. Nvidia GA103 pictured 496 millimeters squared and mediocre. This week, the much rumored but yet to be proven GA103 rumors were mostly codified as true. The RTX 3080 Ti laptop card is indeed not GA104 or GA102. It is its own in-between die. And Geeker1, a Chinese YouTuber, has pictures of it. In total, GA103 is powered by 7,424 CUDA cores, that's 21% more than GA104, 96 ROPs, same amount of ROPs as GA104, 58 RT cores and 232 tensor cores, 21% more than GA104, and a 256 bus, at least in its laptop iteration. Early results show a card that uses about 20% more energy than the 3080 laptop variant, the previous NVIDIA mobile flagship, while offering 10 to 20% more performance. So yeah, it's not really that impressive so far. It's 20% bigger than GA104. We're offering usually less than 20% more performance and 20% more energy consumption. So yeah, the one thing that still isn't confirmed to me is if the full die has a 320-bit bus. I've seen a lot of outlets reporting that A4500 actually might be a cut down GA102 card. Very cut down, by the way. If it is, I guess, then I don't know. But I've heard conflicting things from other people. So someone needs to dash out one of those. And there's a reason I didn't do my big GA103 leak, because while I was confident on some of it, the other things I wasn't as confident in. And I don't know. I guess we'll see if it is 320-bit total, but they disabled 32 bits for, would that be 30? Well, more than 32 bits for. Would that be 96 bits, or would that be, I don't know. I think there could be room for a 10 gigabyte RTX 3070 Ti desktop if it is a 320-bit card, which would make some sense to launch. As it would, I think that's a smarter. Yeah, I think if they have the capacity, I think that's a better card to launch than a 16 gigabyte 3070 Ti. Like, what the hell is the point? Like, it just looks so silly. Just admit it. You didn't give enough RAM to your cards. But what did you see about this? Or what did you think about the 3080 Ti laptop in general as well? Because those reviews are basically all out now.
Laptop reviews are always a little weirder. Fewer people cover them. And it's hard to review a single component of a laptop, because they're all matched together. But and different weird configurations depending on manufacturer. But it looks like it performs slightly better than a 3080, and that's the most you can say about it.
3080 laptop.
3080 laptop. Yeah, I should be clear. It looks like it performs better than a 3080 laptop. So if it's not obscenely more expensive, I guess maybe it's a better option, unless you care about battery life at all. Because, I don't know, looking at the models with the 3080 Ti, like the new Dell one, is like a 50-minute battery life. And that's too low in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I guess if you have a complete desktop replacement, that's there for, what was it, like $3,500? But to an extent, in my opinion, the laptops that you can get with a 3080 Ti versus the laptops that you can get with like a 3080 or 3070 or 3060, the choice to buy is more influenced by other components in the system almost, where it's like, I guess I'm getting a laptop with a 3080 Ti because I don't want to have I don't want to have the last gen i7 paired with it. I want the 12700 paired with it because that's probably the best laptop CPU out there right now, right?
Yeah. What is it? Was it 12900H or whatever it is?
Yeah.
That's an interesting point as well. Is like you're almost not even buying the 3080 Ti laptop for the 3080 Ti. It's because it comes with the best Alder Lake CPU. It performs very similar to the 3080 laptop edition.
Yeah, and that's my entire point. It's like the thing that would drive me to buy that, although I'm not the person for any of these because they're all between like the cards, not cards, the laptops that I'm talking about are all like $3,200 to $4,000. So I'm not buying any of them. But if I were, I think I would be like, oh, well, I would rather have Alder Lake. And I guess the 3080 Ti is secondary to that. Like, whoa, I get 10% more performance and have a 10% lower battery life or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, yeah, clearly NVIDIA launches something like this because they're like, we got to have a new flashy graphics card to go in those new flashy Alder Lake laptops. I don't know if there's much else to say here. I mean, to this day, GA104 is clearly the best balanced design die. Maybe that would change if it had 320-bit bus enabled, but it doesn't in the laptop version. We'll just have to see if that's an option. I could have missed it for everyone listening here. I haven't seen proof there, but I also remember there were rumors of a GA103S die and a GA103 die. Who's to say they didn't only make one of them? You know, I don't know. But until we get a die shot of what A4500s are using, and even then, what the 3050 launch with GA106, and we'll probably switch to 107 eventually. We still don't know, you know, for sure until we get a full diagram proving that. Although, actually, is that out there? I thought there may have been a diagram shown of it. I don't think there is yet for GA103. So we'll have to wait for that, though. All right. Let us move on to the final story, added last. Story number 7, monolithic Hopper rumored to be 1,000 millimeters squared. Not much to say. Copite7 Kimmy tweeted that GH100 is just below 1,000 millimeters squared recently for the monolithic version. Meanwhile, Greymon55 suggests that there is still an MCM variant. If true, this explains what Moore's Law Dead has heard about power consumption of top Hopper, and also suggests that Radeon clearly has a technology advantage next gen. I don't know. I still hear that Hopper will be the best for like AI workloads, but I've heard rumors of like up to 1,200 watts for some of these Hopper cards. Yeah, if it's 1,000 millimeters squared pushed hard, yeah, that could use 1,200 watts actually, maybe.
I mean, there's not much to say about it. That's just a massive die, and yeah, the idea that could use over that could use 600 watts is like, well, duh. And I guess, you know, maybe we're in a future where every NVIDIA top-end graphics card needs to come with a refrigeration unit or something on it, because I don't know how you cool that at a certain point.
Yeah, I don't either. We're going to have to see. And of course, you have to point out that Hopper is not meant for gamers, at least as far as we can tell. It's still like A100. And so they can afford, you know, if this makes their AI work run twice as fast to get this crazy product, they will pay for the liquid cooling or whatever else, Peltier cooling. I don't know what else they're doing to keep it, you know, from lighting their servers or data centers on or training centers on fire. But at the same time, I'm still like, it still sounds hard to cool to me.
Yeah.
Again, I guess if you think about it, though, Dan, hear me out. 1,000 millimeters squared. If it uses 1,000 watts, cut that in half. So what? Is that any different than like a 500 watt Lovelace card that's a 500 millimeters squared?
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
And so it's at least spread out more from the die space. But yeah, so I guess actually maybe it is doable, Dan. It would just have an insane cooler.
Well, you would need an insane cooler because, yeah, like you're saying, maybe the heat density is the same to an certain extent, but like you still need to have something to move air or whatever thing you're using to cool it over it.
Yeah. Well, and I guess one more thing I want to add just to emphasize here. That part I said in the tiny little write-up about AMD Radeon having a technology advantage, I've always heard that there's MCM variants, and Greymon said that he believes there is still an MCM variant of that. Now, I've heard there's MCM variants. I've heard high power usage. If there's both, this explains how all of that makes sense at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, though, the fact that they're making a monolithic die 1,000 millimeters squared tells me there's some major performance losses in certain types of apps when it is MCM. Whereas as far as we can tell, AMD's getting to a point where RDNA 3 is going to try to just work well in everything as an MCM design. I don't know why NVIDIA would be making a 1,000 millimeter squared monolithic die unless their MCM technology is just a full gen behind AMD.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. Or they're just working on two completely different architectures, which, I mean, we kind of know they are, but
And I don't know if other people have leaked this. I don't even remember anymore, but I do believe, I don't think I've said it yet. I think this is one of those videos I was sitting on, like in my musings folder in case I have time to do a video on it, which is that Hopper should launch before Lovelace. And I was always like, well, if Hopper's launching before Lovelace, you know, why isn't Lovelace MCM even if they're next to each other? That never made that much sense to me because you see CDNA 2, I believe it is. We're on the second one right now, launching as an MCM design before RDNA 3. That makes sense to me. That's a professional one first. They're going to work out some of the bugs, but, you know, in apps meant for professional workloads, they will work around any issues with having an MCM card scale effectively. All right, but yeah, so it goes CDNA 2, then RDNA 3 MCM. Why would Hopper be MCM and Lovelace not be? Well, now we know it probably has more caveats to its performance than AMD, and there's a reason Lovelace is monolithic as far as we can tell. All right, Brett Summers writes in, "Hi, Tom. I've been following your content since around June 2020 or so. I made the attempt to go through your backlog when there were days I had no content to listen to, and I know you said Golden Cove was a leak that you've held near and dear to your heart. I was wondering, is there any other architectures that you feel the same way about? Ones that you've announced to MLID listeners or not even? Thanks. Yes, Alchemist. For sure."
Yeah, that was a pretty big one.
I mean, that is to the point that like we were the only ones leaking that. Like to the point that you had people doubling down. It's never coming out or coming to laptop first last year. Wrong, you know, and we had pictures while other people were leaking incorrect info. Yeah, for sure. The Alchemist launch is one I'm going to launch closely is one that really feels near and dear to my heart. In terms of other ones, I mean, look, there's going to be things like Meteor Lake. RDNA 2 is a big one because I feel like that one I completely nailed, but I nailed it like a month before it came out. At least the full leak of it. You know, Raptor Lake will be a big one as well. Trying to think if there's anything, you know, if SMT4 ever comes to anything from AMD, that'll make me go, finally. I wasn't crazy. My sources weren't, you know, that AMD guy didn't lie to me. But, you know, I'd say those are the other things worth mentioning. All right, let us then move on to the final wrap-up. So let me see what we got here. NVIDIA raises MSRP of graphics cards. So yeah, there's that one. We already talked about that. 600-watt Lovelace, supposedly. Do I have anything to add to that? You know?
No.
What I would say, again, is if Lovelace is 600 watts, I have a hard time believing that's constant. I have a feeling that's thermal graphics design power, and it usually typically uses 400. I just... We'll see, but I have to hope. You have a hard time believing it, you know. Let's see. New architectural thing is popping up from OX22H about Lovelace as well, showing 20% better ray tracing performance per raster performance. So again, showing that if Lovelace doubles, or I think it's going to be closer to 90% better than Ampere's gaming performance and rasterization, that their ray tracing will be over twice as good. A little bit over twice as good, which is kind of what you would expect, kind of like what Ampere was over Turing. Let me see. Although I still think RDNA 3 may actually win ray tracing as well. We'll have to see. Nvidia in a Hopper trademark dispute with Dish. I forgot to add that to your script, Dan, but yes, that's going on. Oh,
I forgot that the Hopper was a thing that existed by Dish.
Yeah, because we've been streaming for like a decade now without bothering with cable. I mean, there you go, Dan. That's just hilarious. I just love these. Like, you can't possibly call your graphics card Hopper after the name of, you know, like, what was it? I forgot. Was it a Navy codebreaker, which she was? Something like that. Mathematician. And it's like, this is like our Joey Hopper.
It's like, it reminds me of that lawsuit, that trademark dispute that like Arrested Development had with the I believe it was rap group Arrested Development.
Yes.
And then they're like, these are clearly different things, and they dropped the case. But
yeah, that's just silly. Tomb Raider running on a Game Boy Advance. I just threw that in there because I thought it was cool, and that the PlayStation 1 is substantially stronger than a Game Boy Advance, and yet the guy got that running. I gotta say, a lot of these videos are like, oh, I got Tomb Raider to work on a Game Boy Advance. This is like, here you go. Here's your resume for applying to a game studio.
Honestly, yeah, like, if you can show a studio that you did something like that, that's impressive. I mean, it's a weird, like, novelty thing almost, but it's interesting. that people, and it's just interesting that people are still going back to these things and screwing with them still.
Oh yeah, I added this here. Overclocking non-K Alder Lake CPUs is possible with the right motherboard. Like, and here Sean Knight on TechSpot points out that Intel Celeron G6900 can be overclocked by almost 60% with the right motherboard. Just like some absurd like 5.3 gigahertz. Yeah. I mean, what is it? So is this a quad core here? Let me just look this up, because that is an interesting idea. Like those Pentiums. Like, what if you got it to, let me see, is it okay, yeah, I thought it was just 2 cores. But like, what if you take one of these Pentiums that costs like $60-$70 with 2 cores, 4 threads, or even 4 cores, I think some of them, and you overclock it by to like 5.4 gigahertz? At what point does it compete with the quad cores, I wonder?
Yeah, the one thing I'll say is I don't know if this is necessarily a good move, like for somebody looking to buy, because I think it's only like high-end high-end motherboards really that you can change the settings in the BIOS with. So if you're spending like $220 on a motherboard with like a $70 processor, that's an interesting pairing.
Hey, but you can upgrade to Raptor Lake later this year and go from 2 or 4 cores to 24 cores.
That's true.
Let me see. Is this in stock on Newegg? Actually, I want to see. I probably am missing a number because Intel CPUs have the longest names ever right now. Yeah, but there's an i3. Was it 12? Is it 12100F? Where is it? Oh, it is. It's just like out of stock because everyone bought it. So the 12100F. Let me. See, I thought 97. It's like $100. That's the one caveat I would say, Dan. Is DeBauer got the i3 12100 with 4 cores, 8 threads to 5.4 gigahertz sustained all cores. That's better than a 5600X, I bet. That's all I'm saying is you pay $100, overclock it on a high-end motherboard, and I know that's not the best, but I bet most games run really well actually at those clock speeds with Golden Cove cores. And I actually can't say I wouldn't recommend that. I'm just saying, like, do you get a $200 i5 with 6 cores or a $100 i3 with 4 cores? If you can clock it fast enough that it makes up for not having 6 cores, it's hard for me not to recommend the i3, because then you can upgrade to Raptor Lake later this year.
Yeah, that's true, I guess. It's also more of a gamble, but...
Sure, but it's half the price of the i5. But I know, I guess you might say total cost of the system is still up there. Let me see. Intel working on mining chips. Did you see this, Dan?
No, I don't know much about this. Not really. It doesn't surprise me they're making mining chips. It's a profitable industry.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I will say is I've heard rumors of AMD and Samsung working on them. Let's wait for them to be on sale before we confirm anything. Also, 27 gigabit per second memory coming from Samsung. So like 30% faster than GDDR6X.
Really makes GDDR6X look great.
Yeah, I know. Unless we're getting 35 gigabit per second GDDR6X near the end of this year, which I have not heard that for Lovelace. Which if it does, okay, there's your bandwidth problem solved with Lovelace. Just, you're going to use RAM 50% faster. But I don't know. I think people, again, are underestimating how much faster pro versions of these consoles could get if they just wait a year and give them 50% more bandwidth than what they have now. Just pointing that out. More than 50% more bandwidth than, because they could go from 14 to 27. That's almost double the bandwidth.
It's huge, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could literally just enable all the dies in a PS5, clock it 10% faster, and give it double the bandwidth, and there's your PS5 Pro. And then you could even disable that and sell that as the slim diskless model. I wonder if that's what Sony's doing. Moving on.
We'll see.
Wait for another video. And then moving forward, interesting. Let me see here. Nvidia giving up on ARM. We already got that. Oh, yeah, we've already talked about that point from Kyle Bennett. ARC getting resizable bar. I don't have much to add to that except that, again, I think Intel's going to try to have all of the software features NVIDIA and AMD have right now for ARC when it launches. And that's half the reason.
It seems clear that they are.
Yeah. And Intel, Raja is saying they want to get millions of ARC cards into gamers' hands every year. Again, guys, these reports, I think, semi-accurate for some reason, saying, oh, they're not really going to have any cards at launch. Yeah, okay, Charlie, we know you hate Intel. I think Intel plans to make a lot of graphics cards, guys. I just don't know exactly when the bulk of the volume is hitting.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
They're competing.
Yes, they are not starting this huge graphics division to launch a small amount of graphics
40 cards.
Yeah, so I do expect a lot. I just think the question is when. All right, then let us move on to the wrap up here. The final reader mail. Bfish writes in, the Broken Silicon with Tim from Hardware Unboxed and the other recent episodes have gotten me to thinking, AMD does seem to be using a one-size-fits-all approach, which is great for desktop and server, but how long can they keep this up if Intel holds up their game with Meteor Lake and offers variants specifically tailored to target different markets? Stronger graphics with less cores for general use notebooks, or more P cores for gaming laptops, more E cores for productivity, doing this all with tiles. It's an issue for AMD.
I think as with Intel not being competitive for a few years, they were able to get away with just increasing core counts and stuff, but I think AMD will probably at some point have to move to a more Intel style approach, or move to, or will have to become heterogeneous eventually. I don't know how long that is, but I think they'll be fine for a couple more gens, but they have to eventually.
Yeah. I think, again, we shouldn't. Intel's kind of focusing on the tile naming and nomenclature first. That does not mean AMD isn't going to mix and match stuff as well. I just think AMD focused on the chiplet first. Intel's focusing on the different tiles first. I think they're both going to be trying both things. I think you're going to see kind of a tiled approach from AMD coming as well, just after Intel, and which one executes better, is who will win. Evil Steve Software Box writes in, hey, Tom, and presumably Dan. You presume correctly, Evil Steve. Tom, in the latest Q&A, you mentioned, or even potentially leaked, I guess, that RDNA 3 will have a massive boost in ray tracing capabilities. I did. Similarly, when you were asked a while back, you said that DG2 would be an computing powerhouse and that it would have RTX capabilities like RDNA 2 and Ampere. I did say that. So what about DG3 Battle Mage? How will DG3/Battle Mage compare when it comes to production and creation tasks, ray tracing capabilities against RDNA 3 and Lovelace? Oh, I already hear that by the end of DG2, Intel, I actually got an update from a source, wants to have good, professional capabilities, shall we say, non-gaming. So, again, it's like, how will it compare? You got to just wait for reviews. I mean, what? NVIDIA, just lied about the efficiency of Ampere. Of course, behind the scenes, we knew that was bullshit if you had sources to talk to, but I guess is a fair point, and I don't really even pay attention to public statements that much anymore. Just my own sources. So, but I think until it's out, it's hard to say. DG2 isn't even out yet. We need to see how that compares in ray tracing. What I've heard is basically for the performance tier better than AMD. So again, if they launch something as strong as a 3070 Ti, tentatively, I would expect the ray tracing to be pretty close to the 3070 Ti and better than a 6750 XTs, if that makes sense, or better than a 6800s or something. But again, so much of this is also based on how much devs cater to the ray tracing performance of the architecture anyways.
Oh, that's also true. And, with launches, it's always very vague at first, like when cards are more than a year and a half out, I would presume, with Battle Mage. It's a while before that comes out, so we only have an idea of what it might be like, which is why I think the idea of how you name things in your videos, really far out products, you calling them whispers, it makes sense. This is, or at least putting early very leak, early,
early before leak in the title.
Yeah, this is very early data. This is I'm giving you an idea of what the idea of the architecture is supposed to be, but saying exact performance is just impossible at a certain distance out.
A named person writes him. He says, hey, Tom and Dan, with what you know about RDNA 3 along with the general trend of the cooler market for desktop cards, do you believe that the 7800X, if that is what they are going to be calling it, I think he means XT, class of GPUs will have a cooler smaller than 2.5 slots, or will this be a 3 to 4 slot monster like some of the past high-end cards from Nvidia? Thank you and keep up the good work. Well, thanks for writing in, a named person. But for those who... what?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think you'll get a lot of graphics cards that are really big, but I don't know what the official model will be.
I think at the end of the day, what you see from AIBs is going to be kind of the standard a lot of the time. people are willing to pay for a big card. I know a lot of mom and pop stores or people at Micro Center say, hey, look, I think there's this idea from AIB and from stores that the big cards sell better because they look stronger. The counterpoint I make to those people is it that that's because they're stronger or because only the stronger cards have the giant coolers? But I digress. There's definitely a correlation either way. So they've already built these coolers that are capable of cooling 400 to 500 watts. Some of them barely, but they do it. I don't see why they'd back away from that on the top cards. Having said that, I think there's still going to be dual slot cards or 2 slot cards as the standard, at least below the 7800 XT. And I would expect there will be 2 slot versions of that as well. Especially, I expect reference ones to be. Now, will AMD for the 7950 XT make it at least liquid cooled or a triple slot one for $2,000? Maybe. Probably.
I would go probably.
Yeah, because at this point, that seems to be what you do to win. But I don't think even Nvidia, let's just split the difference between 450 and 600. Let's say the 4090 is a 500 watt card. Nvidia will justify it by saying, hey, look, it's not always using 500 watts. If you had a power supply that can handle the 3090 or 3090 Ti, 99% chance it can handle this. And then they'll probably make the 4080 350 watts or something and say, hey, look, if you can handle 320, your power supply can handle 350. My 750 watt, and again, it's like I think it's a platinum one. My 750 watt platinum handled 400 watts of an overclocked 3080 Ti fine. So they'll say, yep, so we think the 4080 can be 350. I don't think, then it follows, I think the 4070 is going to stay below 300. And then that'll be 2 slots most of the time.
Yeah, and, there will be a couple that are like 3 slots, so you get the extra cooling that you don't need.
Yes. Timo writes in, hi, Tom and Dan. What do you think of the future of optical disc media? Not necessarily optical, but most storage media not requiring downloaded internet connections. This external format has clear benefits, but the trend now is software and contents as a service, it seems. Thinking of the looming 8K horizon for TVs and monitor manufacturers and wanting to showcase something you can buy with these new displays and the contents that it needs. Let me see here. Do you think this is going to really happen? He's basically asking, again, Timo, I got to ask you. Please put some thought into how you word some of your sentences here. I'm going to have to just skip ahead here. But he says, why do they have to make it high? Why can't they just give us one Blu-ray disc with 24 episodes of a TV series? And how are they going to stream 8K? Are they going to bring out an optical disc that fits 200 gigabytes? And I actually looked this up. I do not see any 8K Blu-rays on the horizon, it seems.
I mean, it's an old format. We've moved away from optical media completely. I don't know who they would be pursuing that for at this point, except for I guess maybe disc-based video games. But even a lot of video games, it's just the disc is basically just a thing you buy and then download the game from the internet. Anyway.
If you buy Halo Infinite on Series X, it literally is useless. It's just an extra DRM step you paid for. Not true on the PS5, by the way. There is one company trying to not remove your ability to own games, but it's clearly, especially in movies, I couldn't find any. There's already 8K. Remember, we were hearing about Blu-rays before 1080p panels were even out. Classically, the PS3 launches doesn't even come with an HDMI cord. Has the port, but doesn't come with the cord. They were preparing you for 1080p Blu-rays before those panels were even out, let alone
close to standard.
Yeah. And the fact that I see no looming thing for 8K Blu-rays, look, I think some 8K standard for discs will come at some point because someone's going to have to need it for something, but I don't expect it to be economical or used even nearly as much as 4K Blu-rays. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a problem for bandwidth, streaming 8K, but I don't see discs being used. We'll have to see. There will always be some kind of physical media for the film snobs. I'm starting to, now that I'm getting to this position in my life, try to build a small collection of what I think are the best Blu-ray movies on Blu-ray, including 4K ones, just kind of as an archival thing in case I eventually, because I think a lot of these won't be produced anymore, just so I can have some way of watching my favorite movies from the past on like an OLED screen once, if I ever have the money for like a home theater system that's decent. But that's me, and most people aren't doing that. And there's always gonna be something for people like me, and I don't even consider myself a film snob really. So, but I don't think it's gonna be standard, and I think streaming's clearly one in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, streaming is frankly more convenient, and as I think the answer to the looming 8K monitor horizon is also gigabit internet is becoming increasingly more common. I guess the speed that they deliver it to you at is still going to matter, and improved compression algorithms are still going to matter. But I think it's conceivable that you could stream 8K.
I mean, yeah. What was the requirement on Netflix? Recommended like 25 megabit per second. You can stream 8K. That's bare minimum. But what I now have gigabit internet, which has made things a lot better for me. But yeah. So I don't know. I think the gigabit internet becoming standard before there's even an 8K optical standard on the horizon tells you everything you need to know about how you're going to be watching 8K. I think. Evil Steve Software Box writes in one more time. He says, "Hi Tom. What about Dan? What is up with the Microsoft Direct storage? I bought a discounted Gen 4 SSD from Amazon a while ago, thinking to myself that I want to enjoy the low loading times I was promised were now possible with an Ampere graphics card. And now Windows 11 is here, and we were told they held it for that, and yet nothing. It's still not implemented even in Windows 11. What's the holdup? Why is there no mention of this feature in existing or upcoming PC releases?" I would say it's almost like Sony might have actually put a lot of effort into their loading tech, and that it isn't as easy to just flip on a switch and add to PC as they suggested to you it was.
Yeah, and I think that's the discussion with like SSDs on the PC market in general that no one really has. Is like, oh, I have the super strong, powerful, fast SSD, and it's like, okay, is your software even utilizing half that speed? Maybe
mine is,
half,
but not in gaming, really.
I don't think there's much of a need for me to get an SSD that's much faster than what I currently have, and it's a Gen 3.
Like at this point, you might as well, wait for like Raptor Lake or Zen 4 or Zen 5 PCIe 5.0 SSDs, right?
Yeah.
I'm confident you might as well wait for that, Dan. I'll just say it. Like by the time 4.0 is utilized well for PC loading in a lot of games, I think 5.0 will be around and beat the PS5's loading. So I think that's clear at this point. It wasn't obvious a couple years ago, but it seems obvious now.
It's a classic thing. Software needs to catch up to the hardware that's running it.
And I think when it comes to direct storage, I need to keep quoting what I've talking to developers who are playing around with it, because they are, they're looking into it for PC, like what it will actually mean. And most of them say it's actually going to be closer to PS5 loading times than Sony would want you to believe. But it's closer to PS5 loading times if that's all it's doing. And when we load the Division 2, Dan, I'm sure you've seen your CPU go up to 100% usage. And that's because that game loads a lot of assets quickly, leveraging all of your cores. Because again, the faster you stream in bandwidth from your SSD, the faster the CPU you need. That's why the PS5, and to a lesser extent the Series X, has a coprocessor to do that, so that they don't have tons of stuttering. So yes, direct storage will let you load a game in like 2 seconds, but it's not going to let you asset stream unless you have the extra CPU cores to stream in the assets at the same time. Same with like if you're using tensor cores with Nvidia to load, right? But were they doing denoising? Were they doing something with ray tracing? Because it's cutting into that tensor performance if they stream in storage at the same time. And I think at the end of the day, you're going to get much better performance than what the PS5 can do, but it's probably going to be with Meteor Lake and Gen 5 SSDs when you have the extra CPU cores there, maybe even the coprocessors built into Meteor Lake to stream that, and Gen 5 SSDs that can just brute force their way into being as fast as what the PS5 and to a certain extent the Xbox can be as well with its BC pack and streaming capabilities as well.
Yeah, but to an extent, I don't know if the whole coprocessor thing is necessarily going to happen or become common in PC in the near term.
Before we just have 24 cores anyways. You don't need coprocessor.
I think brute force is the way it's going to go, as it always does with PC.
Yeah. Will something happen? Maybe, but the AI and the neural engines they're adding right now are stuff that they can have like a third of the apps use every day. I don't know that every game's going to need that asset streaming to be its own coprocessor, because they don't want to add a piece of silicon that's not used most days. Why add a neural engine? Yeah, they added a neural engine when more cores wouldn't be as efficient overall in day-to-day usage was a factor. Why add a co-processor for streaming SSDs if you could fit 2 more cores? You know, and the cores are pretty
Yeah.
damn strong compared to the PS5 cores by the time that happens. So, yeah, I don't know. I will say it's weird it isn't implemented yet, though.
It would be nice.
Like, even if games don't really use it, it is weird they haven't released it yet. I actually do think. I mean, it's just funny seeing Nvidia announce it. That was one of those big things that I leaked about Ampere that I got correct, and it's like it might not even be a factor till Lovelace anyways. Anyways, speaking of anyways, saying the word anyways, we are anyways done with this episode. This is a horrible transition. I'm getting tired. Any last words, Dan?
No, I think we did it, Tom.
I think we fucking nailed it again, man.
Hell yeah.
If you do think we nailed it, and hopefully you do, please consider supporting us on Patreon. You know, we cannot do this show without you. You get exclusive podcasts like Die Shrink. You get no ad versions of Broken Silicon that come out early. You can ask me and guest questions. You have I've some more very interesting guests coming on very soon. You're not going to want to miss that. You can ask free questions on loose ends. I mean, you can talk to the community, talk to me. I mean, there's really so much there for like a couple dollars, $4 a month. And the more we get support on Patreon, the more the focus is just releasing ad-free content every week to that. And, you know, so if you really like it, you'll get more of it, and you'll push us to make more of it and allow us to hire more people on as well. Yeah, I guess that's really all I have to say after the final shameless plug. Thanks for listening. We look forward to talking to you, the community, again for the next news episode. And take care of yourselves, everybody.
Bye-bye.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, I don't do this alone. Moore's Law is Dead is a team with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother, Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, and special assistance by Carbon Cry. Find all of our information, including the information of sponsors you can support, at www.mooreslawsdead.com. If you would like to send fan mail or hardware to us, please mail parcels to Moore's Law is Dead at P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. And speaking of fans, patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content possible. The aging business model of spamming ads all over the content is dying. The future of media will be built on fans paying for the content they actually want to exist. And so if you have the extra money, but only if you do, please consider supporting us. For just $2 a month, you get access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to have your questions read aloud on Broken Silicon, Die Shrink, and Loose Ends, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord, full of like-minded people who would love to meet you and talk to you about computer hardware. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the entire back catalog of Flyover States podcasts and other projects Moore's Law is Dead has done, and thanks in the credits of videos and other perks as well. And hey, if you can't afford to support us, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family on social media, Reddit, and forums. And give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your preferred podcast app. All of this really does help so much. And if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, hire Tom for consulting, or are a person of interest who would like to be a guest, please reach out to the email address mlhbdead@gmail.com. But as I said, this podcast would not be possible without its patrons supporting it, and so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher producer levels: Brad Mellon, Anthony Gareffa, GUK, Benny Berlin, Justin Yant, Thomas Rupp, I Love You, Lynn and Jim, Ivan K, Tom Bailey, Muhammad Al-Kawari, Frederick Lau, Lynn Yee, Justin Paris, Zachary Martin, Terrence Herod, Drita Full, Phil S, D31337 Antics, Jackson A. Miller, Jesse Jeskowiak, Josh Law, JB Jing, Travis Gooding, Michael Philosopher, Lebo King Kilo, Fatboy Disaru, Daniel Hyde, A Guy in PA 81, Nathan Mose, Cole Addicts, Matt Sam, Aaron Close, F7GOS, Matthew Landavazo, My Name is Nobody, Judson N. Alethros, Jensen Wang, Hey There's a Kitty, Greg T. Wanchik, Rentaru Matsukata, John Jameson, Sam Vansel, Matthew Lane, Mark Raidmaker, Jan Rauner, Chris Licata, Michael McGee, Meyer Techrance, Eric Jackson, Jonathan, Patrick Grow, 3DS Boy 08, Dominique Cox, Stefan, Original Ross, Sandy, Garrido Saunderson, Joachim Hagen, Teak Autumn, Sol Connor, Michael Casa, Andrew S.C. Jitz, Aaron Keith, Gregory S. Ecker, Hexapuma, Tom Sanfilippo, Justice Brennan, Zutsu Taylor, Trevor Power Stew, Elena Nana, Daniel Nishbal, Franco Frederic, Dane Galanowski, Ian Clifford, Axel Cisneros, Leighton Perry, Joseph Kieran, Brett Summers, Blake, Donovan Russell, Noah Nocoella, Zlicky, Martin Porshegi, David Cowden, Ricky Tan, Hulan, Patrick J.S., Justin Staples, Freddie Canoas Jr., Stephen Coates, Kiwi Phil, Brucha, Jeremy Show, Mitchell Pell, Silvanos, Eddie Del Castillo, Jacob Laster, Luis Correa, Deke, Otiv Kurtz, Tyler Lindley, Tim Robbins, Jake Dude 23, Brian Riggleman, Justin Gower, Caillou Markelli, Dave McCoy, Valco Malev, Gabe Langner, Rodney, DNA Tech, Michael Deaton, MJB1, Maurice Courtois, Wesley Sager, Sarcastro, My Sharona, White Truly, Roman, William W. Draper, Air Rat, Spam G. Spampton, Henry Zhang, Stephen Hart, Christopher A. Butler, Greg, Peter Moore, Amy Bill Chief, Justin Thomas, Sam Miller, Sammy Malas, James Anderson, Shakira, Nick Rakin, Alden Mobley, Matthew Lazier, R. Pete Sharma, Mean and Pork, Jimmy N.G., Mads, Matthew Lazier, Benjamin Oshley, Mark Mitchell, Shield TV, Kuto, Aaron, John Wissink, Mohammed, John DeBunt, Post Media, Sean Ashmont, Daniel Dewar, Stephen Zhang, JSMMH, Georgie Kostaninov, PC Beast 22, Reginald Ari, Narathiel, Ivan, Charles Russell, Hal Booma, Akarsh, Edithia, The Grid, Andrew S., Chris Rich, Joachim Hagen, Desist, Josh Law or Aiden, Chris P. Erbakken, Chrysanthine, Zave Beat 03, Powell, Zigartowski, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.